paste, the link for the meeting agenda in the chat, that'd be great. All right, we're going to do the secretary's report. Our secretary, Commissioner Easley, is not here tonight, so Commissioner Miller will fill in.
I will try to do my best. So just a couple notes. We have some responses to some fiscal year 2026 letters that were sent out, I believe in November. I wrote them to the Department of Public Works and the DC Public School System that we did receive responses to, and those will be posted on our website. You can read those there. We also received a biannual report from our Special Committee on Public Life, and that will also be posted on the website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Miller. On behalf of Secretary Easley, are there any questions from commissioners regarding the secretary's report? Okay. Moving on to the treasurer's report, Commissioner Morales.
Thank you, Chairman. As former treasurer Bill Easley would say, I'll be brief. Our current balance in our checking account is $51,866.49. We have not had any major transactions since our last public meeting in February. All of our spending since then has been on administrative tasks or matters like our Twitter account, website hosting, etc. And yeah, I'm happy to say we're in good financial standing. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our treasurer? All right, seeing none, moving on. All right, we're moving into public comments and announcements. So this is an opportunity. We try to put this as far up in our agenda as possible for commissioners and for the public to make any general comments, announcements, things happening in the community, issues they want to raise. We give a minute for folks if they want to speak here. So we'll start with commissioners and then we'll proceed to the public. For those online, you can raise your hand or submit something in the Q&A if you're interested in making a public comment or announcement. Commissioners, are there any public comments or announcements? Yes.
Great. I just wanted to flag for folks that the the Deputy Mayor for Education just updated its out of school time activities page. This is now an opportunity for, especially for those who are looking for out of school time activities for your young people. There's a new website that you can go to search those, and that is at more.dc.gov. And for those, just to clarify, our out of school time activities are after school. They're the activities and engagement opportunities that we have for our young people. As somebody who advocated for this, it's wonderful to have it all in one place. So it should be more accessible. And they also made a special point to include information about special education in those programs that will be serving that population. So I just wanted to flag that for anybody who's looking for activities.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Miller. Commissioners, are there any other public comments or announcements? None. I have one, just a reminder that tomorrow, March 20th, there is a meeting of the Park Road Stabilization Center project. I believe that's at 6:30 p.m., hosted by the Department of Behavioral Health via Zoom. If there are any questions, direct you to Commissioner Thomas Davis, who's manages that single member district where the project is located. He's our point of contact. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to the public comments and announcements. Let's just start with anyone here in person. Is there anyone who has a public comment? Yes, sir, if you could come up to the front and just tell us your name and make your announcement. Yes. Thank you very much. I'll just note really quickly, Commissioner Easley oversees 1A10. I know he's not here tonight, but we'll make sure to. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner Easley actually looped me in on an email earlier this week to DDOT promoting a 3-1 run request, which may very well have been from you, sir. And DDOT referred it to their project team, so they're looking into it.
All right. Any other comments or announcements from the public here in person? All right, let's go to folks online. I see Jordan Smith. You should be allowed to speak. Go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Jordan Smith. I live right across the street from the Harriet Tubman Elementary School, and clearly that project is well underway. I've had some questions from neighbors, and I'm not sure if this is something on your agenda this evening. It doesn't look like it is. One regarding some of the impact of the demolition of the school and some of our properties literally feeling those and what physical impact to our properties might be. If we do have some sort of impact to property, it would be great to know who to contact about that. The other question I received was about the impact on air quality. It's a big building going down. I look across the street, it looks like a war zone. I understand that's what happens when a building is demolished. But there's a lot going into the air. And so, again, two questions I have regarding at least this first phase. And the third would be the timing for the project. Again, you may not have time to answer those questions here, or this may not be the appropriate venue, but I would like to speak with someone about all three of those questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thanks for joining us and making those comments. Tubman Elementary School is located in 1A10. Again, that's Commissioner Easley. I know he's been in touch with them and is on the working group that supports the project. So we can certainly put you in touch with him if you have not been already. I also know folks from the council members team are here, and we can certainly connect you there for any questions that you may have and answers they may be able to provide. But noted that perhaps at a future meeting, we can have more updates or someone attend from Tubman to provide more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are there anyone else who wanted to respond to that or add comments?
So I will just share, I've been through 2 school renovations. The good news is this part does go relatively quickly. It doesn't mean that there aren't disturbances that need to be addressed. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be monitoring and making sure that they're doing what they need to do. But the demo process goes fairly quickly, and it is slated to be completed in 2 years. So I think there's 1 more year left on that project. And then they'll move inside pretty quickly.
Great, thank you. We have another virtual announcement here. I don't see a name. It's iPhone 202. If you can unmute, you are welcome to make your announcement. iPhone 202-549-8232. You're able to.
Hello, this is Richard Dubester. There's 2 points of comment. One, I think the ANC's methodology of APCA approval does not take into account the affected parties. We just renegotiated your settlement agreement that went up before the placard even went up. In my days as a commissioner and all the days I've been a participant in this community, nobody has ever done that before. And I think that's egregious. 2, I would like to find out who can help me get the water in the park at 11th and Monroe Street turned on again. One of our community members is expending tons of time and spent a lot of money to make the garden better. And if there ain't no water, there ain't going to be no plants. Thank you. And the other thing is, when are the streeteries in our neighborhood that are not being used going to come down?
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. I can quickly reply. I know that you're referring to an establishment in my single member district 1804 regarding Cinco Sola, so I can speak to that very quickly. The ANC does enter into agreements with businesses. This was their application for an entertainment license was mentioned at our October meeting and at our October committee meeting and our November public meeting. So those were discussed there with neighbors, with the business owner, and there was amendments made to their settlement agreement. I understand that neighbors at any time can also enter into a settlement agreement with the business. So I do encourage that if a collection of 5 neighbors can enter into a settlement agreement. So I always encourage if there are specific concerns with how a business may be operating, that you can proceed that route. The second point on the water, I know commissioners have relationships with Department of Parks and Rec, who can look into the water feature at the park at 11th and Monroe. So please send us an email and we'll connect you with folks at DPR.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Are there any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner
Mr.
Thomas Davis.
Yes, Mr. DeBester, if you're still there, if you send me a note, I am already in contact with DPR about a few other projects. That's actually going to be a split duty between DPR and the Department of General Services. So please send me a note and I will get back to you by Friday, but I will follow up with the agency as soon as tomorrow.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other public comments or announcements? Anyone online? Anyone in person? All right. I see we have another person online. Raina Johnson-Pugh, you should be allowed to speak. Please proceed.
Yes, good evening. I am Raina Johnson-Pugh. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for the Columbia Heights Family Success Center. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of what we do there. We are service navigators, not case managers. We provide information and referrals to our DC residents. I also wanted to say that on Friday, March the 21st, and April the 10th of this year, we are hosting Paint for Peace painting engagements, and I wanted to invite everyone else to come and join us for those 2 activities. We're also looking for community advocates for our CAC that we have started. We need a total of 9 individuals on that committee. We're down 5, so we are in desperate need of some support in that area. Also, we're looking to network with partners for the Parenting Strengthening Month, which is next month. So if we could get some support with those items, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Pugh. Can you let everyone here know how they may get in contact with you or reach out to the Family Success Center?
Yes, you can reach out to, you can email me at raina.pugh, P-U-G-H, at innercitycdc.org.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe this is the same as before. All right, I believe we have another comment here, and then we will proceed. Is that Richard again? Please go ahead.
Yeah. One of my questions was not answered. When are the streeteries going to come down that are not being used and hardly ever were used during COVID? It's 2 years past, and some of them are very, they cause lots of consternation for the neighborhood.
Sure. I can answer that given our work on the Transportation Committee. So the latest update we have from the city on streeteries is that support for the pilot program to address some of the regulations in permitting may be currently paused. So unfortunately, I can't give you a solid timeline for when those streeteries may be coming down. The city continues to work to find ways to address some of the concerns about pests and rodents and things of that nature. But at present, I think given some of the recent concerns with budget, those programs are currently stalled, unfortunately.
Did you want to add something, Commissioner?
Yes, Mr. DeBrester, since we've discussed this before, as you know, my committee now has jurisdiction over public space, but we'll be working in conjunction with the Committee on Transportation regarding some issues. What I think you're asking is that the two streeteries that are located at Macon, which is now closed, and I believe there is a second that you're saying is not being used, but the two with Queen's English and the one at Cinco Soles, which I believe they do have one, those are still actively permitted because they're not being used. I don't know if there's a ton we can do, but I defer to Commissioner Sherman. But if there is a problem that you're pointing out about the, I guess, in the, I guess the misuse or the misuse or inactivity of a particular streetery, please send us a formal note or request that we can share with the agency and get a little bit of clarification.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take one more public comment here. We see a hand online from Donetta Baker. Please go ahead. Donetta, you are free to speak. We can't hear you right now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Donetta Baker. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist with Collaborative Solutions for Communities. And of course, we're in the Columbia Heights area. This is my first meeting here, but I just wanted to know if there any way, like with funding, we have various, we have youth programs and things. And so we're looking for ways to, for funding for our programs, and just wondering how we can go about getting with funding, being assisted, getting help with our programs, our youth programs.
Thank you. Sure, I can answer that question really quick, just in the spirit of public announcements. ANC 1A and all ANCs across the city, or many, offer grants. You can find information about our grant program on our website, anc1a.org. I believe it's under Community Resources and Community Grants. There is an application period, an application to submit, and then it gets reviewed and voted on by the commission. So would direct you to our website to learn more about how you can apply for grants and possible funding. Thank you. Sure.
Hi, Ms. Baker. I'll just also add, the district has a website for partnerships and grants that you can go to. They should regularly post notices for funding. We also have the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs that regularly releases a variety of different community-specific grants through their different offices. And if you would like to connect with me, I'm happy to share that information.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone in person and online who offered public comments and announcements. Again, this happens every meeting, so we encourage you to come in the future and bring us concerns or announcements you have for the community. We are moving right along into our 3 presentations for the evening. We're joined by Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, Ward 1 Councilmember. Then we'll have Jeff Gilbert from the Beloved Community Incubator. And finally, we have Sean Moore of DC Water Lead-Free DC Initiative. Each presenter will have give or take 5 minutes, and followed by question and answer and discussion. So, Councilmember Nadeau. Yes, Commissioner Thomas Davis.
Just a point of order. I know we reformatted our agenda, but presentations from the council and the executive are technically afforded 10 minutes. I just want to make sure the council member has enough time to get through what she needs to get through, and we can ask questions.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to be gracious with our time for council member. Thank you for being here. So, floor is yours.
Pick up, or should I grab it? Pick it up. Okay. Yeah. We want to make sure folks at home can hear what they came to hear. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to join you tonight. I am standing between you and a robust agenda. So I will try to be efficient here, but I'm very thrilled to be able to bring an update to residents of ANC 1A. I'm sure many people have recent action by our federal government in mind right now, as do I, top of mind. A quick update on congressional action. You probably saw last week Congress passed a continuing resolution that would slash $1.1 billion from our budget mid-fiscal year, which would have the impact of essentially a $2 billion cut because we've already, spent half the year's worth of money. Although that passed in both houses, in the Senate immediately following, Senator Collins moved a bill that was adopted unanimously that fixed that, separate from the continuing resolution. But that means that the House of Representatives still has to return and vote on it in order for that to go into effect. We are working together to advocate to Congress. For those of you who would wish to do so as well, we encourage calls specifically to Democrats explaining the situation because a lot of them don't understand what it is. They think that this bill might give federal dollars to the district when they've just been home in their districts talking with constituents who are really hurting, wanting to know, why would we give $1.1 billion to the District of Columbia? It's important to let them know these are our local dollars. We budgeted them already. The money does not go to the federal government. In fact, it would just sit in our bank account and we would not be allowed to spend it. Yes, that is exactly the feeling that I have. So if you are inclined to do some advocacy, we recommend Democrats right now, just to educate everybody, call legislative directors or whoever you can talk to and say, we urge you to pass the legislation to fix DC's budget, more or less. If you want talking points, hit me up on email. We have to solve this. If we don't, we're going to have to make serious cuts to things like teachers, cops, firefighters. So we're all working together to get this done. And when Congress is back next week, the advocacy will really heat up. We obviously have a challenging time right now also with the administration, the presidential administration. DC voted in 2020 to designate ourselves as a sanctuary city. I was proud to be part of that. We protect our immigrant residents from federal interference. That's really important, especially here in Columbia Heights, Mount Pleasant area. There is a bill to repeal that right now in Congress. It's going to be like this for a while, guys. So we are, keeping an eye on that. We'll advocate against it. I have some other ideas that I'm not going to speak about publicly right now because that kind of tips my hand. But just so you know, I'm thinking about that a lot and how we keep our residents safe. Our policy is we don't cooperate, we don't turn people over, we don't share information. And that's been the law since 2020. There was police action at the Institute for Peace over the weekend, Monday. It feels like the longest week ever already. I and other council members are investigating MPD's role in that. There are wildly conflicting stories. I've heard a different one about every hour since it occurred. And so in our oversight role, the council members are trying to get very specific answers from MPD about what occurred, what role they played, and whether or not they cooperated with a federal agency. I have been told, or I should say, I was not directly told. The chief has told council members that the feds have repeatedly asked her police to help with, dispersing employees who've been let go at various federal agencies, and they have said no repeatedly because they do not assist with that. Where the confusion is, seems to be that this is a private property and MPD does respond to calls of trespassing on private property. But beyond that, there is too much murkiness for me to say they did the right thing or they did the wrong thing. I just say that I'm not satisfied with the answers I've gotten so far, and that is a topic that council is taking up right now. Individual members, a group of us, and also as a whole. So please, if you could be patient with us as we try to gather those facts. Those of us who maybe haven't made public statements yet, it's not an endorsement of what occurred. It's more of trying not to react without all the information, which can sometimes be hard because there's a lot of passion. And we want to ensure, I'll speak for myself, I want to ensure that we are not cooperating with the feds in doing things that is not our job. The job of MPD is to keep our neighborhood safe, not to assist with personnel issues and federal initiatives and tyranny. So I'll leave it there for now. and move us back to local issues, which is what you guys hired me to do. So, big news on something that 1A has been involved with for a very long time. And even though it's now in 1E, is that Park Morton is moving forward. I have been inside the building. I have seen a 4-bedroom unit. Each unit in that building was built with residents of Park Morton in mind, so built to spec to fit the families that are eligible for returning. And there are several more buildings that will be going up this year. But this one is going to be available for current and former Park Morton residents to move in very shortly. And it is incredibly exciting. When the project's done, there'll be a number of large buildings, some townhomes, a park, and a dog run. And even though it is now 1E, you will all be welcome to join the celebration. Thank you to those of you who, in your capacity on 1A, voted to support this over the years. It has taken a village, and the council and the ANC sticking together on this is what ultimately is going to get it across the finish line. No real news on the Bruce Monroe site, if that's what you were thinking next, but I think we're looking at shovels in the ground end of 26, beginning of 27. It's far. There's permitting and financing, et cetera. So Park Morton, though, happening. Which is literally in my backyard. So I can be like, yes, in my backyard. Okay. April is Earth Month. I am going to be reaching out to help coordinate a bunch of cleanups. So mark your calendar for the 26th. Think about everyone here, whether you'd like to organize a block cleanup or a neighborhood cleanup. These are going to be done in conjunction with the Anacostia Watershed Society and the Mayor's Office of a Clean City. The mayor's doing her cleanups the weekend before. We're going to do them the following week because Earth Month, yeah. And also that's when the Watershed Society is doing them. And also we can't all do them at once. Our Office of Clean City doesn't have enough supplies to donate. So we just we'll keep the party going. I would say that like the mayor's cleanup happening the week before might mean we have less trash to clean up, but I think we all know that's not true. There's just a lot of trash in our community because we have so many people passing through at all times. And we all, of course, pitch in to clean that up. One of the featured items in this year's cleanup is we're promoting My Bottle Bill, which is legislation I introduced to add a 10-cent deposit to our beverage containers, bottles, cans, etc., to get them out of our waste stream and back into the reusable stream, and also out of the river, out of the parks, off the street. We're going to ask everybody who does a cleanup on April 26th to count how many beverage containers they pick up, just so we can keep track of that and see, what an impact the bill will have. People like getting money back when they pick things up off the ground, let me tell you. So I think it's going to have a big impact on litter for us to get this done. And I will surely be around talking about this for some time. So if people have questions tonight, that's fine. But I'm pretty much always around. I had like 3 meetings about the bottle bill today, and I can do it in my sleep. You just tell me when and where, and I will be there to explain whatever it is you need. Speaking of waste diversion, you may have seen smart compost bins popping up around the ward and the city. There are 30 of them citywide. I believe the closest one to us is 16th and Park, something like that. Yeah. They're orange and they have a lot of writing on them, and there's an app and you go boop, boop, and then it opens and you can put your food waste in there 24 hours a day. Of course, in Columbia Heights, we also have the farmers market. We think these things complement each other in addition to the curbside composting. These are concentrated in areas that the smart compost bins that either don't have access to a farmers market or areas with a lot of multifamily buildings that can't participate in the curbside pilot. And the goal is get as much food waste out of those green cans as possible. Reduces our rat population, or at least the food that we're giving them. And I can tell you, and those of us that are doing it, I absolutely see a reduction in rat activity in my backyard because my food is not on the buffet for them in those green cans. So this is the future. This is how we're smarter about our trash containerization so that we are preventing access to rats. So please participate. If you don't know anything about composting, also happy to talk to your ERF about that. Or just stop by the farmer's market this weekend or any weekend and talk to the team there about how to do it. And they will give you a primer so you can start doing it at home if you're not already. My next Brienne on your block is Tuesday, April 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. It's going to be in 1A, location TBD, but it'll be posted on briennecanado.com/BOYB. So we will also advertise it widely. But if you want some more one-on-one time, stop by. You get a one-on-one conversation. You get at least 10 minutes. If there's no crowd, we'll go longer. But it's just a chance for you to bring issues or casework or whatever you need. Get some FaceTime. We do it every month. We move around the ward. The reason I really wanted to come tonight was just talk about the Neighborhood Management Authority. And I know I mentioned this last time I was here, and my colleague David briefed the committee on February 24th. But for those who haven't been following, I introduced a bill in January to establish a Neighborhood Management Authority for Columbia Heights and a separate one for the U Street area. It's a new model for a place management entity for the district, although it is not without precedent, even in the region. There's many models across the country. Bethesda has one. It would serve similar functions as a business improvement district. So clean and safe programs, coordination of public services. It's still a public-private partnership that can be nimble and would have a sustainable, dedicated funding. One of the very special things about this is we do not rely on taxing property owners to generate enough revenue to run it. We actually collect parking revenue. We will use the garage and we will use the parking meters, and we will set up a parking zone in Columbia Heights to capture the revenue of visitors who don't have a visitor's pass. So like your visitor can still park for free if they've got their little pass that you've printed for them. But everyone else who's not coming to visit a neighbor would just pay to park on the street. It also, and this will be exciting, based on what public comments were so far, I think this will be exciting to people. It's given the jurisdiction to manage district-owned public space and properties like Civic Plaza and the DCUSA garage, which gives them more focused attention and more dedicated resources and reserves. Whereas the city budget just turns over every year and we spend it or we don't, right? And that is a huge asset, is to have an entity that can hang on to money and have it available for emergencies or maintenance or other uses like that. This is my #1 legislative priority for Ward 1 this year. So I'm pushing really hard. If this sounds good to you and you want to help with that, we are asking Councilmember McDuffie, who is an at-large member, which means he reps everyone in this room that lives in the District of Columbia, asking him to hold a hearing in his committee. And you can say, I live in Columbia Heights, I support the Neighborhood Management Authority, or even I'm curious about the Neighborhood Management Authority, and I would love for it to have a hearing so I can hear more about it and I can come out and testify and explain how I think this would improve our community. That helps. And you are his constituents, so he's got to listen to you. Columbia Heights is one of the most highly trafficked areas in the entire city. And even though over the years I've added the Main Street and plussed up the clean team and added the community navigators to help serve people with substance use disorder and created the street outreach team for homelessness, it's like herding cats, and there's really no one doing the herding. And it's not because I don't want to, it's because it's kind of impossible to do it from my seat. And there isn't really someone even in the mayor's seat office that can do that. We have technically a plaza manager that District Bridges, staffs, but it's even them, they don't have the authority over the plaza. They're just, once again, herding the cats. So this actually allows the entity to take authority over the plaza, be present in Columbia Heights from 11th all the way over to Hyatt, and be the boots on the ground that we need to coordinate all the services that we have. And another thing to keep in mind is this would be, there would be a board of directors. They'd be appointed by the mayor and the council, similar to Events DC or the Green Bank. And that means that they're accountable to the public in a different way. We could hold hearings on their performance, for example, but they also can function independently and manage things. So it's actually a really great design for Columbia Heights. I think it'll also be great for U Street. And I want something lasting to be here long after I'm council member, because what we have right now is a bunch of grants that I cobble together every year. And if I'm ever not in this seat, I will not be in the seat forever. If I'm, whenever I do decide to retire, A neighborhood shouldn't have to depend on who's the council member. There should be a permanent structure that everybody is a part of, that carries forward the needs and the mission of the area. So that's the goal. I'll leave it there. And I thank you for your time, and I am here for questions at the pleasure of the chair.
Thank you, council member. Okay, we're going to start with questions from commissioners, and then we'll open it up to the public. Commissioners, we'll do, please, just a reminder to keep it to one question. We can do multiple rounds if needed, but let's be respectful of each other's time. So we'll just go in order of folks who want to ask any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we'll start here and then we'll go down there. Commissioner Knoll.
No, I had a round of questions. Go ahead.
Commissioner Knoll, go ahead.
Thank you for coming tonight, Councilwoman. I had a question regarding the 11th Street protected bike lane, which some of my constituents and fellow committee members on the Transportation Committee have raised concerns about making sure that it gets built on the current DDOT timeline, and some concern that the mayor's office might be moving to delay or even cancel the project. And I just wanted to check with you and see if you had heard any updates on the project's progress and making sure that it does get built as intended by DDOT.
Great question. And what I love about the future of the 11th Street bike lane is that the part downtown has already been built. And sometimes that's the loudest part complaining. So, and I ride it and I love it. In fact, I rode 11th Street here. So, first of all, let me say I'm hugely in support of this project. We've been reiterating that to DDOT regularly. We spent a lot of time ensuring that for this area, for where 1A is, that it came all the way up and also took into consideration where the existing streeteries are. Regardless of how you feel about them, they are there right now. And we don't want to penalize any businesses, and we certainly didn't want to make any enemies. Our understanding is that it is moving apace. And we are checking in with DDOT Friday because they are walking with some neighbors down near U Street who have concerns about it, and very closely monitoring that conversation. Because we sometimes worry that, if the wrong person gets into the right person's ear on something related to bike infrastructure, that it all goes sideways. So I am trying to manage that and be diligent about that. That concern is closer to where Vermont Avenue is, where some of the work's already been done. And so my hope is that that ship has sailed, but we're keeping a close eye on it, and we'll use that as an opportunity to check in with DDOT. So.
All right, much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Next to Commissioner Thomas Davis. Oh, I was going to just take whoever wanted to speak. I've captured you. We'll go in order, and then we'll go to Dieter. Sorry, Commissioner Morris. Gotcha.
Thank you, council member, for being here. Going back to the Neighborhood Management Authority, I do want to caveat a little bit of what I'll say. Well, not even caveat. I just want to make a note. You made a point about not being able to herd the cats, if you will, around the neighborhood and the various stakeholders that make up Columbia Heights. And I didn't hear you really talk about our role in that. And I just want to remind folks that, along with we make up kind of the governance structure of this neighborhood. And so when there are problems and challenges, folks should also be coming to us because we're the closest to the problem. So I didn't hear you mention that. I know you, of course, know this, but I just want to say that on the record that we are a part of that governance structure, and we should be the ones providing that neighborhood level oversight in conjunction with the work that you're doing. On the Neighborhood Management Authority, how are you making, so you talked a little bit about in a different meeting, the parallel movement that U Street is having to kind of still have a bid discussion, but then also thinking about ways that, this authority could come into play. Can you talk a little bit about how do you make the business case, right? That over the last 20 years, the district has poured into all of these large developments like DCUSA. We basically bankrolled much of what Columbia Heights currently looks like. A lot of our CBAs, we don't know kind of what was missed or not missed in the way of any commitments that a lot of those property owners made to the residents of Columbia Heights. So how do you make the business case that we're gonna let businesses, let property owners off the hook after we have poured into their properties with tax abatements and all these other things? Why is it that you don't feel property owners, and I understand that conversations have started and stopped over the years, but what's the business case for saying property owners shouldn't pay the people of Columbia Heights back, but we're going to spend more district taxpayer dollars to support what should be a community-driven effort to fund a lot of the work and a lot of the things that we know Columbia Heights desperately needs? So how do you square that? Because I know you've thought about this a bit and you've had conversations, but how do you square that? Because I know that's going to come up quite a bit as you have these conversations over the next several months.
It hasn't so far, but let me speak to it tonight. So I'm going to challenge the premise a little bit. And first of all, Columbia Heights hasn't had much investment in the last 20 years. There was a lot 20 plus years ago. And since then, it's basically been what I can cobble together, right? And not trying to toot my own horn, but I'm the one doing that. And there hasn't been a lot of interest or investment otherwise. It's fine. I'm proud to do it. But we need everybody to have some more skin in the game here. And I don't mean ANCs, because you guys don't get paid, right? You work very hard and you don't get paid to do any of it. And, you know, you're elected every 2 years. So sometimes there are continuity challenges there, same way there are with any elected officials. I love bids. I support bids. I love to see them happen. Bids have to be formed by businesses. They have to petition together. There have to be enough agreeing to do it. It might happen on U Street this time, but this will be the 4th time they've tried. And so I don't know if it's going to happen. It always falls apart right when people actually have to sign on the dotted line. Yes, I would like to be taxed for some services. But beyond the taxation structure of a bid, one of my biggest concerns with it is that the voices that are most uplifted in a bid structure are property owners, which continues to exacerbate the inequities that we have in our communities, because the property owners ostensibly are the wealthiest people in our community, and they then get to control this entity. There's some exceptions. There's a seat for small businesses. There'll be a seat for ANCs. There'll be a seat for community members on a bid, but it's not the same because they're not the people paying in. And this model, which isn't tax dollars, it's parking revenue, slightly different nuance, but it's taking money from people who come here to use the services and then reinvesting it in the neighborhood, which I think is actually a really beautiful antidote to the bid model. So that's the way I think about it. U Street, like I said, they're going through a different situation. They're once again trying to form a bid. If the bid is formed and the neighborhood management authority come together at the same time, the bid becomes part of the neighborhood management authority. There's a whole section in the bill about how the two would work together if they exist. And that could be true for Columbia Heights later too. The other thing that's helpful with this structure is property owners may decide that they're willing to form a bid after this is up and running because the tax rate wouldn't need to be as high to actually run a program of this size. You need around $1 million a year to run a program like this. And because there aren't that many high dollar taxable properties in this area, it's just a small geographic area compared to like downtown. You really have to have a high rate. Like you see this in Adams Morgan. They have probably the highest bid tax in the city because they're so small. And it's really hard for those business owners, those property owners. So that's the way I think about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have Commissioner Morales, then Davidson, then Miller on the speaking list. Morales, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Sherman. Thank you, Councilmember, for being here tonight. I guess I have more of a comment than a question, but I'll add a question at the end just in case. I wanted to just commend you personally and publicly here for your leadership that you've shown over the last week or so, especially around the efforts of protecting and defending DC and home rule. Yes, please give it up to her. That's something that I've been pushing for and hoping I would see more out of our council. So I'm glad that you at least have been putting yourself out there on behalf of all of us. And also want to commend you for your efforts around the two bills you talked about earlier about the bottle bill, and just the sort of importance of, you know, climate legislation or environmentally friendly legislation in the district. We don't really see a lot of that in DC. So I'm glad that you're also taking a lead on this as well. It's really, you know, it's something that's, I think, is very important that we don't really think about on the you know, local politics level. So I'm glad that this is happening. Even with the cleanups, like, you know, something we've talked about as a commission is, you know, starting those up again now that the weather's getting nicer. So I'm sure we would love to work with your office to get those done here in our commission area, at least, if not the ward. Yeah, and lastly, on the neighborhood management authority, I think that's you know, I was part of those meetings that, you know, one of your office members put together with our commission and other commissioners from across the ward, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I think what really resonated with me, what you said, but, you know, creating something that will last after you and having something that will leave a long lasting impact and will allow commissioners and residents themselves to kind of be self-sustaining in the affairs and operations of this ward. And so for my question, because I'm a teacher and I see that we have a crowd full of students here, Councilmember, what do you think is the best way for students and other youth groups to, like, you know, be involved in what you're doing and pushing this legislation forward? You know, you mentioned earlier the hearing with Councilmember McDuffie. Are there any other ways that, you know, our kids can get more involved in pushing these fights forward?
I love the question. Thank you, Commissioner, and love that we have students here tonight. There's a number of ways to get involved in the legislative process here. And the number one way for something like this, which is a bill that's already been introduced, is to either advocate for a hearing and or sign up to testify. And testifying before the council might seem intimidating at first, but it's real simple. Anyone can do it. You get 3 minutes to say whatever it is you want to say about the topic. You can either do it in person or you can do it remotely, or you can submit testimony in writing. But I always recommend testifying in person if you can. Sometimes these hearings are not convenient to people who work or go to school during the day, and that's understandable, which is why written testimony is also a great option. And, you know, the other thing, which we don't need in this case, is sometimes people come and advocate for something to be introduced. When there's an important issue going on in the community and the law does not speak to it, or the law needs to be updated or corrected. That's also a really great place that students can get involved, and often do here. And sometimes students even run for ANC.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Commissioner Davidson.
Hi, good evening, Councilmember. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that the community has the opportunity to engage with you and hear from you in person. I think that's really special. I think that the Neighborhood Management Authority sounds really wonderful, and I'm really excited about it as a piece of legislation. I'm curious if you could speak to any opposition you're hearing and what your plans are to address the opposition.
Great question. No, mostly curiosity. When I met earlier this week with some of the commissioners and the Main Street and the 11th Street business owners, and one of the conversations that we had over there was about how do we ensure that 11th Street businesses are not drowned out by the voices of 14th Street businesses, which I think is a really, it's like the elephant in the room for that meeting. And I was so glad that they just came out and brought it up so we could talk it through, because one of the things we talked about was potentially having separate committees or board representation for different parts of Columbia Heights to ensure that that doesn't happen. And one other thing that I raised is just sort of the different issues in different parts of Columbia Heights. So 11th Street, they're begging for foot traffic. You know, they love some marketing and branding that ties them to the rest of Columbia Heights, whereas a lot of the businesses on 14th Street, at least in the heart of Columbia Heights, are worried about cleanliness, safety, that type of thing. And then, of course, north of 14th Street has a little bit more kind of both, right? Not as much foot traffic, maybe still a little bit of the trash and the crime. And so there are sort of distinct needs throughout, and ensuring that everybody's needs get met is going to be a constant tension. It's true of any structure like this, but talking about that now is really helpful. And that's one of the reasons that we've kind of got the NMA Roadshow going, is we want to hear all of the ideas. So yeah, it's mostly curiosity. And I think one of the business owners who actually was one of the founders of the Adams Morgan bid. He has businesses all across the board. He goes, "This sounds too good to be true. So what am I missing?" Which I appreciate. And I think, it is not too good to be true, but it is an effort to get it done. And so it mainly, the biggest concern, I think, is how do we actually get this through the legislative process timely so we can get it going for Columbia Heights? Thank you for the question.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes, so I'm glad to go last because I think most of the questions have been covered and answered. So I'm going to keep this super short. First of all, congratulations on Park Morton. Having been through the ringer with you on that, that's a job well done. I'm looking forward to seeing Bruce Monroe move forward as well. I also just wanted to comment on the Neighborhood Management Authority. And again, I want to say that for those who don't know, this isn't a new thing. This has been a very long and concerted effort that you and your staff have put into putting this together. And one of the things that I did want to appreciate is that you added in DC USA to that, which is something that you and I, yes. So thank you. And I think sort of to Commissioner Thomas Davis's point, this is a public thing that we are not extracting community benefit from. And I know that this has been an ongoing issue. We'll deal with it further. So my question is, this has been put into this legislation. And I'm optimistic for it, but is there, in addition to this legislation, also work that we can be doing to peel off some of that restrictive covenant and some of the restrictive language that's currently around the use of that parking garage?
Great question. I don't know, but capturing the revenue, I think, is a good start, right? The challenge people may not know is that it's a condo where one member of the board and Target and Grid Properties who own them all are the other, and we have to do everything unanimously. And so it's been really challenging to do anything there. Like, for example, open up the lowest level to RPP parking or something creative like that. Or even get space for the vending equipment. So I don't know if we're going to be able to crack that particular nut with this, but you did remind me of something that I totally glossed over, which is in the bill, which you're going to love, which is it creates a different taxation structure for DCUSA so we can give them the vacant tax penalty for vacant storefronts. That sounds really esoteric. Let me explain. So right now, any property typically has one tax lot. And if any portion of it is occupied, then for tax purposes, it's occupied, right? If you have one of your retailers vacant, you still pay the regular tax rate, which is an issue, right? Because how many of these big properties have multiple vacant storefronts and there's no penalty for that? So this takes aim at a particular property, DCUSA, because there are some parts of it that have been vacant since it opened, and the community and I continue to find that unacceptable. So we're trying to legislatively remedy that.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize myself really quick for a very simple, quick question. If neighbors want to learn more about the Neighborhood Management Authority legislation, where can they go or who can they talk to?
It's a fabulous question, because I was saying to my staff today, why do I not have a link that I can send to people from our website? So that is happening. There will be something on our webpage where it's just like a slide deck and the bill and a little narrative about it. For now, it's emailing me and David Meny, and we'll send you the slide deck and whatever you need to know. The bill itself is on our Legislative Information Management System, LIMS, LIMS. If you Google DC LIMS, you'll find it there. You can just type in Neighborhood Management Authority in the search and it'll pull up the bill, and you can read the very well drafted introductory statement that David Meny wrote, and then the 26 pages, some of the bill that creates, our big opus for Columbia Heights and U Street.
Thank you. All right, I didn't see any hands from commissioners to go a second round, so we're going to open it up to the public.
Oh man, I thought you were going to say there are no questions from the public. And I was
Well,
like,
we
I'm
don't
out.
have any yet. We might hear folks in the
I'm
audience
out.
who want to raise their hand. You can use the Q&A for folks online or raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you. Yes, miss, if you want to just state your name and
Latunda James, and my question is really quick. In regards to who we petition in Congress, should it just be the House or should we be also petitioning the Senate members to clarify that in fact, this is our own money and not money that the president is giving?
Yes, ma'am. I'll repeat the question. Who should we be talking to in the Congress? So to answer your question, you don't have to bother with the Senate right now because they've already done their part Friday night, just under the wire. It is strictly the Democrats or strictly the House members. Now, the current strategy is that, this is going to get a little wonky, that the legislation would be considered under suspension of the rules, which means it would need a 2/3 vote, which means every Democrat has to vote for it, plus some Republicans. And so right now we have sort of an inside baseball strategy with the Republicans. The elected officials are doing that. And we think it's probably more meaningful for the public to reach out to Democrats and say, I'm a Democrat, you're a Democrat. This is a Democratic city. Please make sure you vote for this bill. This is not funny business. What's funny business is what you put in the CR, but you can leave that part out. If you would like specific talking points, I can absolutely email those to you too. And my email is bnadeau@dccouncil.gov. It's also on my website, brianneknadeau.com, and happy to send you what we're using. And I think we're probably waiting a couple days because we've been blasting people a lot on this. We have a newsletter Friday. We can make sure we include the language in Friday's newsletter for advocacy. And I better tell somebody that too. Write
Thank
that
you.
down, David.
Any other questions from the public? Any online? Okay, seeing
go
none-
now.
just in the matter of
Just
time.
kidding. I love taking
As soon
questions
as
from the
you say
public.
it,
I'm
yeah.
being very silly.
I see two here. Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't.
Rochelle, go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't type fast enough. So one of the reasons sanctuary cities came is to help police and firefighters better serve the community. And with the current administration, how is the council approaching them? Because I feel like if you talked as much as it is about taking care of the immigrant community, if that's just a red flag and they stop listening, are there other avenues that you're going to approach this conversation to protect the community, but not trigger people to stop listening and not even, I guess, hear what you're trying to say? So how's the council approaching?
Great question. And I certainly set myself up for that one by leading with sanctuary cities. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm mostly not talking about it and instead doing things behind the scenes because I feel like under Trump 2, that's safer. Under Trump 1, we did all kinds of know your rights seminars. We were out in community. We were talking to people about this all the live long day. And under Trump 2, I feel like that type of activity puts people more at risk. Not me, them. I don't care if I'm at risk. I got a lot of privilege, but I don't want to put people I'm trying to help at risk by talking about it all the live long day. So we have a resource page. I work closely with a lot of nonprofits that are trusted sources and messengers for our immigrant community. They know where to find me if they need a thing from the council, and I check in with them regularly about what's going on. Have organized a couple trainings this year that I did not publicize to the public, but shared with the people I thought needed them. And also working with a coalition of elected leaders across the region on communicating what we're seeing from ICE. The bottom line here is that we have to educate the public about what to do and what their rights are, in private property, not opening the door for strangers or a knock or even a warrant. If you can't verify it's a judicial warrant, administrative warrant is different and it does not require you to open the door. Don't ask me to tell you the difference. That's why we have experts that do these trainings. But ensuring that we protect private property and private residents is key. I know there's a lot of fear, schools, churches, hospitals, et cetera, and have been talking with some groups about, making sure all the churches have the trainings. The Attorney General has been helping make sure the schools have the information they need. And I think that's the key. You don't have to call it sanctuary city. I often just talk about privacy and keeping the information of our residents private and safe.
Thank you. And Jordan Smith, go ahead. We can to speak. Jordan Smith, you're recognized to speak if you can unmute.
Looks like he's,
Can't hear you.
Jordan seems to be unmuted, but I cannot
I
hear
am
any.
unmuted.
There you go. We can hear you.
Okay. I was saying this might be an offline conversation, Councilwoman, because I work in federal advocacy and am tracking the ability to leverage those $1.1 billion again and what the strategy looks like.
Great.
Is Representative Holmes Norton engaged in this? And what is her position in terms of looking to whip votes from the Democratic side of the aisle? And then my
Great
second
question.
and my second question, and again, we can take this offline because this may be too wonky and I know this meeting's already going long. I would suspect that we can get most Democrats on board, but it's the Republicans that need to be whipped to get to that 2/3 vote count to pass something on suspension.
Yeah, it's a good point. The Congresswoman has been championing the cause. She actually introduced an amendment in the House on the CR that did not get let through under the rules. That was the language Susan Collins used in the Senate. So everyone in the House is already familiar with what it looks like and what it needs to do. The reason that we are not taking the Democrats for granted is because we've heard a little bit of feedback from the phone calls we've already made this week that Democrats are confused and just coming back from a recess are hearing from their constituents about government cuts that they're upset about. And how could Democrats possibly return from recess and then vote for DC to get $1.1 billion more when everybody else is getting cuts? Because they just don't understand. So the calls to the Democrats are a little bit education and a little bit advocacy. This is what this does. This is our local dollars. This is something that has been in place for every CR for the past 20, 30 years. And we just need to make sure that it happens the same way it did in the Senate so that we can spend our locally raised dollars rather than having them sitting in a bank account. So that's why the Democratic focus. The Republican focus is also underway. It is slightly more strategic. It's leader to leader. It's elected leaders from DC talking to leadership in the Republican Party about who moves the bill, under what procedures, who's whipping. The president has expressed his support for it. That has to hold. He can turn out the Republican votes, but that also makes the Democrats suspicious. So it's just complicated. And since you're doing federal policy, you probably get that. Feel free to hit me up on email if you want to give me any advice. I did work on the Hill, but it was a very long time ago. And so I certainly do not consider myself an expert.
Okay, thank you. We have a final question that came in through the Q&A. No, I think this was already answered.
Okay.
In person. So I think, will the media be informed that the $1.1 billion is our money? How is that message being spread?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're telling everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. If you hadn't heard it yet, then you're living under
spread
a
the
rock.
news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Nadeau. We really appreciate your time being here. Thank you for all your work on the Hill on this and other issues. So
May you have a smooth meeting, Mr.
thank
Chair.
you. Have a great night.
Thank you all.
All right, we're moving right along to our next presentation. I think joining us virtually is Jeff Gilbert from Beloved Community Incubator to speak about work with the Columbia Heights street vendors. So we can promote Jeff to panelist. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. You'll have 5 minutes and then we'll do question and answer. So go right ahead.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Grateful for the opportunity to speak to the commission and with members of the public here. I will keep my piece as brief as I can. So I imagine there's lots of frustration. People have different feelings about what's going on with street vendors in front of DC USA Mall on the block of 14th Street in between Irving and Park and Kenyon. Just want to speak to y'all, clear the record, and make sure that there's information from our advocacy organization and from the vendors just getting to everybody. So my name's Jeff Gilbert. I'm the Legal and Technical Assistance Director at Beloved Community Incubator. We're a local nonprofit organization. We've been organizing with street vendors since 2019, organized a big campaign to pass the new street vending law, the Street Vendor Advancement Amendment Act of 2023. We organized a big 3-4 year campaign culminating in passing the legislation in April of 2023. We're at a frustrating place of the legislation has been law. It's been fully funded in effect since October 1st, 2023, but it largely hasn't been implemented yet. We are working currently with around 40 street vendors who definitely want licenses, and we're actively working with them on moving through the license application process. Mostly, I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to speak with y'all here just to share that that's happening. Any narratives about street vendors not wanting to be in compliance with the law is just not true. Sadly, I do feel the need to address that to the commission and to the public just because of what occurred at the performance oversight hearing in late January of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, DLCP. So at the oversight hearing, DLCP Director Crow, great public official doing her best, unfortunately stated pretty clearly that it's her opinion that a lot of the vendors in Columbia Heights who don't have a license thus far don't have one just because they don't want one. They basically don't want any of the responsibilities of getting a license, but want all of the protections of the new law. Really, I just want to share with the commission that is not a true thing, and sort of here's what we've been trying to do to support the 40 vendors who definitely do want licenses. So there's still no vending zone manager for the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant vending zone, even though the law has been in effect for over a year and a half. Please, any support that y'all can give to push DLCP to hire a vending zone manager, that will be incredibly helpful. That's really the most impactful thing that can happen for there to be a block in front of DC USA Mall that isn't super hectic with vendors on top of each other. There was a law created thinking out how can we create like a fair vending zone for everyone, for vendors, for the public. The street vending zone manager is a key part of that plan. There still is no manager, so it's not really possible for vendors to have clarity about where their sites are. And we're not even sure if it's possible for vendors to fully have a license yet, just because historically for the last 30 years or so, to have a license, you've needed a site permit. And DLCP is just not giving out site permits within the vending zone without a vending zone manager. Though DLCP has also claimed that it's moving away from the site permit requirement within the vending zone, but it's really up to the vending zone manager, who again is not in place, to make sure that there's a functional site system without a site permit system. So basically, long story short, it's been impossible for any vendors to even complete a license application until early this year at the earliest. That's withstanding this site permit issue. The law went into effect
1 minute left.
14 months before that. So the reason why vendors don't have licenses is because DLCP has been working through the kinks, to say it charitably, to make the license application actually work. Even though it's been impossible for vendors to complete license applications all this time, DLCP has still been out sending inspectors every single week, really from October through the start of this year, threatening vendors with huge civil fines for vending without a license. One vendor even received a $2,000 fine, was made an example of by DLCP. DLCP has also been calling the police, which is expressly against the new law, calling the police to enforce the civil vending code. So mostly just wanted to share with you all, since the performance oversight hearing, DLCP has backed off a little bit of sending inspectors out every week and of calling the police. We've been able to start to support vendors to actually complete the license application process. About 7 merchandise vendors have a license. The first 2 food vendors have gotten licenses. That's about 9 or 10 total of the 40 who we're really working closely with day to day to complete license applications. So mostly wanted to share this perspective with the commission. Please, like, we know that DLCP has been out justifying its strong hand with enforcement activity in various ways. If the commission hears anything about that, please reach out to us, beloved community incubator, who's working closely with vendors to apply for licenses and advocate that the law is fully implemented. We can connect you with vendors to talk about what's going on Really just want to stress, like, please don't take DLCP's word for it. And yeah, appreciate all of the support for the street vending community in Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for your presentation and for joining us tonight. We'll start with questions or comments from the commission. I see Commissioner Thomas Davis and Commissioner Miller, and then we'll go to the public. Commissioner Thomas Davis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gilbert, I want to thank you for, I think what you outlined as far as the perspective of the vendors. However, as the representatives of this community, we have heard time and time again over the last 12 to 14 months, the challenges of navigating what we have to live with every day. I don't know where you reside, and I don't mean to sound insulting, but a lot of us deal with the realities of what we face here on the street, you know, on the sidewalk every single day. I myself, I represent the other side of the street there on 14th. And every time I happen to walk my dog or, you know, go to the other side of the street, I'm met with what is often very nasty, very, you know, non-confrontational, but very dismissive behavior by vendors. And I do identify myself as a commissioner. I did have one individual tell me, well, F the government, you know, why are you talking to us, right? So if you're in an environment where you have individuals who do not care about a system, can you respond to that? Because it sounds like from what we've been hearing, vendors just do not want to move. They don't want to go to other, you know, locations. They're very fixed about where they've always been. My second point, what is it that we can do? Because again, I often try to communicate to say, hey, can you, you know, move your table? You are, you know, almost blocking the entire sidewalk. You know, what is it that we can do to be working with you? Because it sounds like your team seems to be on the ground. I often don't see anyone out there providing any kind of, you know, TA. What can we be doing better to work with you so that someone's always out there? Because I will clarify a point you said, there was a vending manager hired. As far as I can tell, they did not do much. And the feedback and guidance that they received from this body, they seem to have ignored. So I want to make sure that we're getting the facts straight and we're doing what we can to make sure residents, businesses, everyone is on the same page about the long-term, you know, policy outcomes and all these other things of this plan. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the question. So I think the way to approach this is really DLCP is not enforcing the law. If the government's not enforcing the law, I don't really know, like, people are left in a tough spot. Like, that needs to happen. That needs to be the first priority. The council passed a law that envisioned creating order for a vending zone. Without a vending zone manager, like, that vision is just not possible to bring into being. The vending zone manager is the organization who's supposed to be out there on a day-to-day basis, supporting vendors to share the space in accordance with, like, an agreed upon space use plan, and supporting vendors with day-to-day technical assistance to remain in compliance with licensing requirements. So I would say the most effective thing the commission can do is follow up with DLCP and make sure that they use the resources that the council has allocated to them to hire a vending zone manager to do so. Like, that is the structural intervention that everybody has made and agreed to here. In terms of how to engage vendors, like, I don't know, it's a really hard, like, I don't know how to approach vendors and say, like, hey, the government's not following the law, but you still have to figure out what you can do within this and make it work. Like, that's a really hard position to be in. And vendors have all of their own experiences, you know, being treated poorly or not fairly by different government agencies. So everybody's carrying around that sort of historical trauma. But I can say to you clearly, like, it was vendors the first place in coordination with us who came up with the idea for a vending zone. Like, they want a vending zone. Vendors want order. Vendors want an agreed upon plan for where everybody's going to be, how they're going to share the space. Really what's needed is that third party that's been essential. It's really like a 5+ year vision, starting with the vendors saying, like, this is something we can get behind, get on board with. Without that independent party of the vending zone manager, who is sort of seen as like a neutral arbiter by the street vendors, it's like that is the plan to create order in the vending zone. So it's, I think really that's what's missing. So that's what I would say. And in terms of the previous vending zone manager, that became a whole situation. But what I can say clearly is the vending zone manager became frustrated because it literally wasn't possible for any vendors to complete the license application. And that's like tech issues, that's intergovernment agency issues of DLCP not having a functioning way to coordinate with the Office of Tax and Revenue and Department of Health. So the reason why the old vending zone manager is not in place anymore is because basically the vending zone manager told their boss, DLCP, hey, your expectation for us is that we support vendors to get licenses. It's literally not possible because of the infrastructure to apply that you've set up and you've controlled. Like, we need you to fix that so that we can do our job. And DLCP's response was to cancel the vending zone manager's contract without cause. So I just want to focus attention on DLCP. I think like really everything starts with the council passed a law. It's the executive's job to actually implement that law. And I think the attention of the commission is best focused on DLCP to make sure that they actually implement the law, and then we can go from there.
Thank you. Before we move forward, I'll just note for the public and for commissioners, DLCP did join us at our February meeting and has agreed to join us every other month. So we do expect to meet with DLCP again at our April public meeting. Next on the docket here is Commissioner Miller.
First of all, I just want to ask our commissioners when we use acronyms, if we could please.
Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection.
And to be honest, I don't know if I could have done that one. So thank you, Jeremy. Sometimes we know the acronyms, but we forget what they actually stand for. So just flagging that for folks, and technical assistance, TA. So just community benefits agreement. So just if we could all just try to remember that not everybody speaks wonkies. And it's good to see you, Jeff. I was the commissioner prior to this last term. I worked with the vendors for quite a while. I think Commissioner Thomas Davis actually asked the question that I also had. I'll just add on, my biggest concern is ADA compliance. Right now, I have a lot of seniors that I represent. We have a lot of senior buildings in that area. And it's dangerous. This is not about inconvenience. It's not about clutter. It is about danger to many of our residents. And I think you gave an answer that I would love to follow up with in the future, maybe in a couple weeks, see if we can't move forward on at least shifting some of those locations. And I did this before, and I understand the challenges of getting the shifts, but this is something I think we need to start prioritizing. If nothing else, we need to make sure it's safe for our residents to walk through that corner, especially on Irving and 14th Street.
Yep. And just to speak to that piece briefly, I think what we've seen in terms of like the site plan for the vending zone actually includes no spots on that corner. Vendors are, like, that's not a thing to celebrate for vendors who have sold on that corner. But from everything we've heard from vendors, they're fine with that. Like, really, like, vendors have been sold this vision for years of a vending zone where there's a vending zone manager who is really like the neutral arbiter who is settling issues about sites. And without that, vendors are just lacking the support that the council intended, and that really that they've envisioned, and that the whole community supporting them has envisioned for years. And I'll just say directly, vendors who sell are out there like every day, especially on that really dense half block between Irving and like the entrance to DC USA Mall. they just want a fair chance to share in like the economic prosperity in Columbia Heights that's been brought by the public investment that created the metro, that created the mall there. They're very flexible. They want an opportunity to sell to the high foot traffic areas. They're very flexible about spreading out to other corners. There's 4 corners at that intersection. There's 2 sides of the street with heavy foot traffic. There's Civic Plaza. So really, like, we're hoping that DLCP will agree to reasonable plans that like actually allow vendors to have a good amount of sites in the high foot traffic areas, and that also doesn't create these density and accessibility issues that are very, very real. We're hopeful that that kind of balancing between the competing interests can be a place that we all arrive at, and we think that we can. It's really just the vending zone manager needs to be in place so that all of this negotiation can actually happen.
Jeff, I really appreciate that. And I think we're in complete alignment about encouraging that entrepreneurship. I think what I'm saying and what I'm asking and what I'll reach out to follow up with later is waiting until the government does what it needs to do to get everything in place does not solve the issue that that particular corner, not even talking about the entrance to DC USA, is highly, it's very condensed and it's a safety hazard. And I have residents who are seniors. I have individuals with limited mobility. This is a danger. That's the only corner. I let them move down a little bit further. I'm happy to work with that, but I don't think this is something that we can wait for the government. I know that this is something I've been asking since before I left the ANC. It's still an issue. I would love to work with you and the vendors to figure out a solution to that particular corner and that safety concern. Just that one. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Please reach out whenever is good. Happy to talk about it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't have any other commissioners on the speaking list. I did want to recognize myself really quickly, just speak in my single member district commissioner capacity. Jeff, thanks for being here. I think I shared with you in a personal conversation that, you know, my mother's side of the family is Colombian. I have seen street vending as a child growing up. I've seen it across the world. And I know that it can be done in an organized fashion. I know that it can be done well. I think what we have in Columbia Heights right now is not an organized fashion. I know that's the vision we all share. So I want to underscore that I'm with you on the entrepreneurial, you know, sharing in the entrepreneurial vitality of our neighborhood, of keeping that as part of Columbia Heights' you know, culture and all of that. I think what my frustration is, and I won't speak for fellow commissioners and neighbors, but I believe they share this, is that nothing's changed in like 3 years plus. And I think we're hearing from DLCP that they can't do anything. And then we hear from the vendors that they can't do anything. And it's like a stalemate. And it also feels like a game of telephone where we're hearing different things from different perspectives. And we as commissioners and neighbors can't get to the bottom of what's true and what's not true. And I think it's somewhere in between everything we're hearing. And so I really appreciate you coming tonight to share that. I think the 2 things I want to ask is similar to Commissioner Thomas Davis and Miller. You know, what will it take to get people to see something to change, to get people, some of the vendors, to move or to spread out or to create more walking space? Like, what is it that you'd like to see maybe commissioners do to start that process? And the second question is, I understand one of the licensing issues is that food vendors can't get clean hands because the Department of Health needs to be able to check where food is being produced, right? In order to verify that it is clean and everything. I know that's hard because a lot of the cooking is happening in homes and other places. And so there's been some creative solutions, but it's my understanding that that's like the stickiness that's stopping the licensing from happening faster. So are there any thoughts on what needs to happen there to maybe expedite this process? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. What is clean hands? Jeff, if you want to go ahead and respond,
I'll speak to that. The first issue, I won't, you know, hammer it over the head, but I think like any specific concerns about the corner that the commission has, please reach out directly to us. We can do a walkthrough of the block one day or a couple times with vendors and talk facilitate conversation and really share with vendors like, hey, look, even though the government's not doing their part, even though you fought for years to change the law and the government hasn't implemented the law, and even though the government continues to threaten you with $1,000+ civil fines and call the police, even though that's also against the law, we understand that that's not fair, but there's these needs for sharing public space that we need to work out, even as you're waiting for the government to do their part. We can definitely get together and talk directly with vendors on the street about that with you all. Happy to do it. To speak to clean hands and food vendors, I'll give a shout out to my my colleague Dakima, who's on the call listening, who's in the weeds on this day to day. I won't make you speak to the details, Dakima, but the reasons why license applications are taking so long is mostly really mind-numbing bureaucratic processes that you could not imagine unless you were there in person. We're talking everything from like there's different staff members working at different times. Sometimes staff will sort of just like refer vendors out like, hey, actually, like this is easy to do by email. Like you can't apply here. Just go home and do it on the internet. And it's like a lot of vendors don't know how to use the business portal online. Then you'll reach different steps in the business portal where you just won't be able to cross past it for whatever reason. Typically, I won't speak through all the details, but if somebody wants to reach out and get more clarity on this, there's just like a lot of different waiting periods in the application process, and then physical forms that have to be mailed to different places, and then coordination with different agencies, and it just literally doesn't work. So Councilmember Nadeau has always been a huge supporter of the street vendors in this effort and has talked a lot about like wanting a one-stop shop. Like if a vendor wants a license, an executive agency office that you can go to and complete it just in that one day. Maybe there's one session one day and you return for a second session a second day. The big picture is basically like nothing even close to that kind of functional license application process exists. So those are really like the main issues. And we're not just like throwing our hands up and complaining. Like day to day, we're literally working with vendors, talking with the staff and all the different agencies, finding the different staff members who really know what's going on and can move stuff, and are moving vendors through the application process. But like that's a clearer picture of like what we're up against in it. Clean hands has to do with alleged debts that you owe the DC government. So the law was changed recently. Now, if you owe more than $1,000 of alleged debt to the DC government for anything, it could be your personal income tax return, it could be like a parking ticket, speeding ticket, whatever. You can't even apply for a license. A lot of vendors have debt related to civil vending fines, largely because it's been impossible to get a street vending license for many vendors, especially food vendors, until we changed the law. And then also for different minimum quarterly sales tax payments. An issue for another time is street vendors are the only business owners in the district who are charged a flat quarterly sales tax rate instead of paying a percentage of revenue for sales tax. So a lot of the time, vendors have a lot of debt. They're not even able to apply for a license, which will allow them the ability to earn income to pay down the debt. That's the clean hands issue. We're also working with vendors to apply for the amnesty program, which covers a lot of the debt, but not always all of it under the new law, and to find other ways to raise money, get under that clean hands barrier so vendors can actually apply for licenses. In terms of food vendors, there aren't really issues with food inspections right now. Mostly Department of Health is just woefully behind in implementing the law as well. They were required under the new law to issue a first draft of regulations for the new micro enterprise home kitchen permit under the new law. But let me take a step back. Basically, like it's very possible under the new law for a vendor to cook food in their home kitchen and sell it, or to cook food from a vending cart on the street. That's very doable. Department of Health is now set up doing inspections for both. basically, Department of Health wasn't able to do inspections in home kitchens until last month, maybe even this month. So there was, October 1st, 2023 until last month when food vendors who fought to pass this new law were relying on this new permit created under the new law to be able to cook food and sell it from their home kitchen. It wasn't possible to get that permit until last month. So maybe that's the issue that you're referring to, but we're hopeful now, like the food inspections are moving forward.
Okay, thank you. We're going to keep moving along. I know we have one more commissioner here who would like to speak and then see if there's anyone from the public. Commissioner Morales, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Sherman. Jeff, good seeing you. Thank you for coming this evening and presenting on your efforts with BCI, vis-a-vis the street vendors. I wanted to speak on something that hasn't, I think, come up yet in this discussion, and that's sort of addressing the sort of cultural and linguistic considerations that are in play here. Most of the street vendors are, Latino, don't speak don't speak English, very fluently, and are just doing their best to get by, as Jeff mentioned earlier, and Commissioner Sherman alluded to as well. I know in the past when your predecessor Yannick approached me and former Commissioner Coleman Kenny about issues that would appear or arise at that intersection, we were always quick to jump into action. I myself, as a Latino man, I speak Spanish. I was able to communicate with those street vendors as well as Yannick, and kind of assuage their concerns and listen to them and work with them to see if we could come to some sort of solution regarding space issues or obstructions on the sidewalk. And so I would encourage. I think government service goes both ways. So I think, Jeff, I would encourage you to if anything like that comes up again, just ping myself, Commissioner Miller, who represents that SMD, or Commissioner Sherman himself, who also speaks Spanish. And we're more than happy to, if we're able to, just go over there and kind of address the situation and see what we can do. Because I'm also mindful of the considerations around how the police in this city or in this country really treat people of color and people from migrant communities. And the last thing I want to do is see MPD involved in anything involving my community. And so, Jeff, to my question to you then is, what's the best way that we can serve you and your coworkers in assisting those vendors when issues like this come up, where some sort of rapid response is necessary? There isn't someone readily available, and these vendors are being pressured by the LCP, MOLA, MPD, or whoever else to comply or move off the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we've set up community defense networks, so folks are able to get out and help de-escalate when issues do arise. But I think de-escalation is really the main way to support. Often there's just miscommunications between government officials of various agencies and vendors that then escalate into a bigger thing. And as you can understand, vendors can be feel like they've been put on the defensive very, very quickly just because of the high impact of potential interactions with police and different government agencies, and a lot of bad experiences in the past. But you raised an important point, something I didn't even mention. A big part of why the license application process has been really hard to get functional is language access is just not something that any of the agencies really are very well equipped to offer. I think the Language Access Act has never really been fully funded, and DLCP has only gotten Fs on every single audit by the Office of Human Rights under the Language Access Law. So it's a real challenge.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we're going to turn it over to the public. If there's any questions from those in the room, anyone online, you can either raise your hand or submit to the Q&A. I don't see anything right now. I don't see any hands in the room. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. And I know we'll be in touch and neighbors as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we are moving along to our final presentation of the evening. We are joined, I believe, also virtually by Sean Moore of DC Water to speak about the lead-free DC initiative. If we can promote him to panelist. Give a second here for him to join. Got an invite? Great, there he is. Hi, Mr. Moore. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your patience. Nice to see you again. We'll give
Great.
you 5 minutes here, followed by question and answer. So go right
Per-
ahead.
Perfect. Let me share my screen. Thank you. I'm not allowed to share my screen. What?
Give me a moment here. Okay, try now.
Okay. Okay. All right, perfect. Are you able to see my presentation? Just want to make sure.
Yes, we can see. Go right ahead.
So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but I will send you a copy of it. So if anyone wants to take a look and spend more time with it, they're welcome to do it. But my name is Sean Moore. I'm with DC Water's Lead-Free DC program. Just wanted to come by today to give you a quick update on where we are with Lead-Free DC and let you know what's going on in 1A. In case you didn't know, Lead-Free DC is DC Water's plan to remove all lead service lines from the city. We have about 42,000 service lines that we're working to remove, and we do that two ways. First, there's two parts of Lead-Free DC, excuse me. First, we're replacing all the known service lines, and the second part is we're working to identify service lines where we don't have information or we're not sure of that information because our records are not complete. So where are we? So as of yesterday, we hit 8,080 service lines replaced. So we made some great progress since we started this program back in 2019. We continue to prioritize areas with vulnerable populations as well as high numbers of lead service lines. And we have this very great program that we're working on with DOES, is our Community Activators Program. And we have 12 paid trainees who are working with us to get an experience and some work experience here at DC Water. So we do have this new dashboard. If you go on dcwater.com/lead, that dashboard is there on the right, and it'll just give you a running total of how we're doing so you can track our progress. But the reason we're doing all of this, of course, is it's all about lead, and exposure to lead in drinking water has serious health effects, specifically on children and pregnant women. I mean, children under 6, well, all children, honestly, can have decreases in IQ and attention span, and it can lead to new learning behaviors or make existing ones worse. And for adults, of course, there's increases in risks of kidney disease, heart disease, high blood pressure, nervous system problems. This image shows you just how lead affects every system in the body. So when I talk about service lines, we're talking about specifically the service line, which is the water line that runs from the water main in the street into the building at what we call the point of entry. And sometimes that's made of lead. That water line, there's two sides of it. There's a public side and a private side. DC Water maintains the public space, but the homeowner's responsible for the private space. So DC Water can't use ratepayer money to do work on private property. So therefore, the homeowner would be responsible for any work. But with Lead-Free DC, we have money that allows us to do that work on private property. We're focused on two types of pipes, and you'll see them here, lead and galvanized, because both of those pipes could contain lead. This is just some photos for you to see what lead pipes look like. And then I have photos here of galvanized pipes. Again, please feel free to go back and check this out later. We also have some tools for homeowners. We have our lead map. You can go into our lead map at dcwater.com/lead. You can put any address in the city into that lead map, and you can see what type of service line material we have associated with that home. We also have a construction dashboard where you can also put any address in the city there, and it'll tell you if we have any planned construction or if there's active construction going on in your area. So we are replacing service lines 3 ways. I'm specifically here to talk about buy-block programs, which is part of our capital improvement projects. And whenever we do capital improvement projects, DC Water pays the full amount. We also have 2 customer-initiated programs. We have a lead pipe replacement assistance program, and that's when you only have lead service line on the private side. We'll do that for free. We also have a voluntary full replacement program for folks who don't want to wait for DC Water to get around to them for a free service line replacement. With these replacements,
1 minute left.
I'm sorry.
Just 1 minute left. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. We do use the prioritization model that looks at inventory and other information to score the blocks, and we use that to determine where we're going to do service line replacements. that's just some photos of what you expect during construction. The key thing, right now, we have 52 blocks in 1A that are part of the program this year. That's about 1,008 premises. We've got 23% of those authorizations signed. In order for us to do this work, we have to have folks sign and give us the permission to do that work. There's a list of all the blocks in 1A, just so you can have that as a reference. This is a copy of the agreement that folks have to sign up for the program. That gives us permission to go on your property and do the work. It is a citywide program, so we encourage folks, even if you're not eligible, if folks ask you or they say something about it, say, yeah, it's a real program and it's really free. And DC Water is really doing this work. We're all over the city at different events if you want to check us out. And we have lots of resources for you on dcwater.com/lead to answer all your questions about this program and about lead service line replacement. And if you want to engage with us, you can also reach out to our lead inbox, lead@dcwater.com, or our lead hotline, 787-4044. Just leave a message and we'll call back and follow up with you. Or you can reach out to me directly. My number and email address is here, sean.moore@dcwater.com, or 202-787-4049. We also have a survey if you'd like to take our survey, just to let us know how this presentation went and if you have any questions or any feedback. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. I know you had a slide specifically that covered all the 1A blocks. That's very helpful. If you can share that with the commission, we'd love to send that around. Are there any questions from the commission for Mr. Moore? Yes, Commissioner Davidson.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. This is really important information. Could you let me know, how would I go about talking to my residents who are renters, so not homeowners, both
Right.
in apartment complexes or in multifamily or single family housing, but they're not property owners themselves?
Right. Yeah, and we recognize that that is one of the challenges with the program, is that it has to be approved, signed by the homeowner or whoever the premise owner is. What we do provide, we have a tenant toolkit where it provides information to tenants for talking to their landlords about service line replacement. We also send this information out, not just this information about the program. We send it out to the residents, but we also send it to the owner of record, so that whoever owns the building will get that information, as well as the folks who are at that building will get that information. We don't always have the correct information, so when our canvassers come by, we're always looking to get updated contact information for landlords so that we can reach out to those folks. But we have had some success with tenants actually helping us. I have some folks who've seen this presentation, followed up with me, and they actually were able to get their building signed up to get a service line replacement. So we will work with tenants to try to get to the owners so that we can get the work done, but that is an ongoing challenge.
Thank you.
Commissioner Batia.
Thank you, Chair Sherman. Thanks for being here. My building is one of the ones that received some outreach about the lead replacements, and that there was opportunity for DC Water to replace the pipes within our building. Is there a cap on the funds that DC Water has to replace private pipes? Or is it like a first come, first serve, or is that for the entire district?
Well, this entire district, we do, we choose these new blocks every year, and, there is funding attached to those blocks specifically. So, we can't just say every block, because we have to do it based on the money that we have. But if we tell you that we're on your block and we're going to do that replacement, that means we have the funding to do that particular residence to get that work done.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Do we have any questions from the public? Folks online, hands, Q&A, anything? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Moore. We really appreciate your time. We know you've joined us in the past, so we thank you for returning, and we'll hope to see you again. Thank you for all your work.
Perfect, thank you. And look, I'll send this presentation out to you shortly.
Thank you. All right, we're moving right along in our agenda. We still have several folks online, just as a reminder to commissioners here in person and those in person. So we're going to keep moving. We're going on to reports of committees. That concludes our presentations. We're trying something new this meeting with reports of committees to streamline the operations a bit and move things along quicker. So all committee chairs submitted information. Our secretary, Commissioner Easley, is not here. So I'm going to be filling in on his behalf. I'm just going to share my screen. I'll note for those with agendas, we did send out the agenda at the start of this meeting. There are meeting minutes from our committees at the back of the agenda. So we're going to go just very quickly. Our commission has 6 committees. So we're just going to go in order here. The ANC 1A Public Safety Committee met last month. You can see several topics that they covered here: key areas of concern, collaborative efforts, engagement with local law enforcement, and the next steps. There is a letter on our agenda tonight. Their next meeting is March 25th at 8 p.m. and you can see their agenda items here. The ANC 1A Education, Youth, and Families Committee also met recently. There were several community announcements you can see regarding the Mount Pleasant Library. They discussed youth safety programs, and they discussed several next steps relating to DCPS and out-of-school time providers. Their next meeting is March 26th at 7 p.m., and they're going to be reviewing the fiscal year 2026 budget. And there's also a save the date here for April 23rd regarding the presentation of the mayor's budget and work on budget advocacy. The ANC 1A Small Business and Economic Development Committee also met in February. There was discussion of the Main Street Growth Fund, liquor license renewals, the Neighborhood Management Authority legislation was reviewed and discussed, a business recruitment strategy, and also vacant properties legislation, as there's a resolution on the agenda tonight. The next meeting is March 31st at 7 p.m. and we'll be covering a liquor license application in SMD 1A04, Commissioner Davidson's commission from Land of 1,000 Hills, reviewing a agreement with that business as well as beginning drafting a resolution on the Columbia Heights Neighborhood Management Authority. The ANC 1A Housing and Zoning Committee also met. They discussed 2025 priorities and advocacy, including the DC 2050 Comprehensive Plan and the Rental Act, which is a legislation that was introduced. They also discussed planning a tenant resource fair and community support. Their next meeting is April 3rd at 7 p.m. Where they'll be discussing the comprehensive plan, coordinating on the tenant resource fair, and continuing work on the Rental Act. The ANC 1A Transportation Committee also met. They discussed traffic and pedestrian safety regarding marking up a resolution proposed by Commissioner Thomas Davis. They discussed a project around damaged crosswalks and reporting those to Commissioner Knoll and to 311, and then also discuss 11th Street Bike Lane project. Their next meeting is April 9th at 7 p.m., and they'll be covering various topics, discussing the Neighborhood Management Authority legislation, the crosswalks project, and other bus and bike priority projects. And last but not least, the ANC 1A Permanent Special Committee on Public Life and Neighborhood Planning did not hold a meeting in February. A biannual committee report from our special committee was received and will be posted on the ANC 1A website. And I believe the next meeting is March 26th at 7 p.m.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, commissioners, are there any edits or things that were missed that folks would like to add? Commissioner Thomas Davis, please.
The Permanent Special Committee did meet in the month of February. We met on February 26th.
Okay, no report was received to the secretary. That's just what was transmitted to me. So we'll make sure we update this and send out to neighbors.
The report that was filed includes all of our dates and the substance of all of our meetings. So I don't know how that would have been missed, but it's in the report that was filed.
Okay, that will be corrected. Thank you. Any other additions, comments? Lots of committee work. We hope neighbors online will participate in that committee work going forward. All right, we're going to continue moving on. We are now at our consent agenda. The consent agenda is a bunch of items that are considered to have unanimous consent of all commissioners and able to be passed by one vote. However, a commissioner can request to remove an item from the consent agenda. I'll note that the minutes of our February meeting were moved, so we'll be voting on those later in the agenda. So items in the consent agenda include a resolution in support of the Vacant to Vibrant Amendment Act of 2025, sponsored by me, Commissioner Sherman. It also includes a letter of support for BZA special exemption at 2710 Sherman Avenue Northwest, sponsored by Commissioner Easley. Also includes a letter of support for an alley naming at 1016 Harvard Street Northwest, sponsored by Commissioner Easley. And finally, it includes a voluntary agreement between ANC 1A and JD Goose LLC, otherwise known as Queens English, located in a single member district 1A04, sponsored by Commissioner Sherman. So we will move forward with approving our consent agenda by unanimous consent. Is there any dissent or objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda and these measures are formally approved. Okay, moving on. We do have an item of other business that we'll move to before we get to new business. Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
Other business comes after new business.
As soon as I said it, I was like, I think that's wrong. Thank you for the correction. We're gonna move on to new business. We're gonna do the minutes first, as the minutes were moved in our agenda to be voted on. So the minutes are linked in our agenda and available on our website if you can see them. These are the minutes from our February meeting, just protocol to approve them. So this is, I believe, introduced by Commissioner Easley, who's not here. I'll bring the motion to the floor to approve the meeting minutes for February. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bhatia. Is there any debate or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll move into a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from the February 2025 ANC 1A meeting, all say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, this motion passes. We've adopted the minutes from the February meeting. We are moving on. We have letter 25-0006, a letter on gun violence reduction strategic plan sponsored by Commissioner Easley. Is there a commissioner that was scheduled to speak about this? Okay. No one? Oh, Billy is on the, wow, Billy, Commissioner Easley. Let's promote to panelist and he will speak to this. He appeared out of thin air.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, Commissioner Easley. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Phew, okay, I made it, all right, give me a second. Hello from Sacramento, everyone. I'm briefly going to speak to my letter on gun violence prevention. This letter is a compilation of work that the Public Safety Committee has done over the last 2 years. We've held 2 public safety forums in ANC 1A with members of the public, the Metropolitan Police Department, the Department of Behavioral Health, the Office of the Attorney General, and many others to make sure that we could sort of learn what was working and what wasn't with our public safety ecosystem. And we also, ANC 1A, just last November, held a joint forum with ANC. Let me make sure I get this right. I want to make sure I give credit to the right ANC. ANC 5F and 6B. We did a forum on violence interrupters that included leadership from St. Louis and Indianapolis and other cities, so we could learn what worked and what doesn't in the violence interrupter system. And we put all those learnings into this letter, and we're urging the city to take multiple actions, including actually implementing the gun violence prevention strategy that was developed in 2021, which has not been fully implemented by the city. Ensuring that there's more effective oversight over our violence interrupters, and making sure that the report that is supposed to come out this year from Johns Hopkins University evaluating violence interrupters that operate in Ward 1, that the recommendations that come from that report are actually also implemented. So there was a lot of work that went into this. And what I want to just leave people with is 2 things. One, a lot of work went into this, and it puts a lot of multiple perspectives from agencies and other ANCs into it. And also that, look, if cities like Baltimore can find a way to reduce gun violence and get leadership and focus on these issues, so can we. And I think this letter is one small step we can bring to the table to push the leaders of DC to make a safer DC for all of us. So that's it. Sorry that I'm late, people, but I will take any questions.
No problem. Thank you, Commissioner Easley. And Commissioner Bhatia, just as our interim secretary, can you please note that Commissioner Easley did join us? Thank you. Commissioner Easley, are you bringing a formal motion to the floor?
I apologize. Yes, I move to approve this letter.
All right, great. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Morales. Is there any debate or discussion or questions from commissioners on this letter? Okay, seeing none, we will move into a vote on letter 25-0006, a letter on gun violence reduction strategic plan, as written and sponsored by Commissioner Easley. All in favor of passing this letter, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Mr. Chairman, please record me as present.
Any abstentions? And Commissioner Thomas Davis record as present. Thank you. The letter does pass. Thank you, Commissioner Easley. We will move on to the next item. All right, we have now the R25-0009. This is a resolution concerning amendments to the rules of procedure of ANC 1A, as sponsored by Commissioner Thomas Davis. You will have 5 minutes to speak about this and make the motion. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to keep this brief because I know we are pushing up on time and we have several other substantive measures that we need to get to. However, this was circulated to all members more than several months ago now. And we have had several conversations time and time again about our rules of procedure, how we conduct our business, and how members either do or do not adhere to certain rules. I think at the outset of this meeting, it was very evident that our rules need to be adhered to in the right way. And what I have put forward are several, common sense, substantive clarifications to those rules that I think will help us avoid the kinds of confusion that, again, was displayed at the outset of this meeting. I am more than happy to go through the provisions of this resolution, but again, members have had this for 3 months now. We have had ad nauseum conversations about the scope of our rules and how compliance is or is not happening. I encourage my colleagues to vote to adopt this resolution, largely because the chair also put forward temporary rules that will come before this body again next month. I have taken steps to largely codify a lot of what was put forward in that measure in this resolution. And so again, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to appreciate that, we have to work from the same playbook. Because if, I'm doing something one way, someone else is doing something another way, or they don't know how it's supposed to be done, things get missed. And again, I think earlier in this meeting, it's a very clear example to all residents who are watching how an unintentional thing can turn into something it shouldn't have to because individuals are not following certain rules. So I will pause there. Again, I move the measure for consideration, but I urge my colleagues to look at this measure for what it is. It is helping us all operate from the same playbook. I know oftentimes folks have communicated that our rules of procedure can be very stifling, but again, following the same playbook allows us to all apply the rules as equitably as possible, and it keeps us all somewhat honest to each other as a matter of professional courtesy, because we're not having to make things up on the fly. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move the measure for consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas Davis. There's a motion on the floor to approve the resolution concerning amendments to the rules of procedure of ANC 1A. Is there a second? Is there a second on this motion? We have Billy on the line. Okay, I'm not hearing a second. We cannot move forward with discussion or a vote on this item unless there is a second. I'll give it another chance here. Okay, no second. We cannot move forward with this resolution as put before the body. So the motion does fail. We're going to move on in our agenda. We have another resolution concerning amendments to the bylaws of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A. This is sponsored by Commissioner Thomas Davis. You will again have 5 minutes to speak on this.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to use my time to opine very briefly on what we just did. Again, this body continues to operate on the fly. Members seem to think that as an advisory neighborhood commission, we should not have a set of prescribed rules by which we govern how we operate. And unfortunately, again, that is demonstrated in what took place at the outset of this meeting. Now, the measure that I am moving now are amendments to our bylaws that were largely directed as suggested additions and revisions by the General Counsel of the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. This particular measure would bring our bylaws into full compliance with the ANC Act as directed by the council. So again, I go back to the fact that how we do our business has to matter. How our rules are followed and applied has to matter. I know that these can seem very mundane, seem very out of reach to folks who don't work in this field every day, but we are still government officials, a part of an elected body that has to function a certain way. There has been a lot of confusion amongst residents about when and how we do certain things. I think the resident who resides in 1A04 said the very same thing. Oftentimes things are happening. Residents don't understand how we arrive at a particular policy decision. Committees are not putting things on paper about the kinds of input they have, received. We have to get to a place as an ANC where we either affirm or reaffirm in some way how we're doing our work so that we can be respected as the government body that we are. So I'm going to end there. Again, I urge my colleagues to understand the spirit of this measure in the same way I thought that they would have understood the spirit of the previous measure. But again, I want residents to understand when things do not happen, it is because we are not operating in a way that follows prescribed rules. So we have the opportunity tonight to show residents that we are operating in as professional a manner as possible. With that, Mr. Chairman, I move the measure.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Thomas Davis. There is a motion on the floor to adopt the resolution concerning amendments to the bylaws of ANC 1A. Is there a second?
I second.
It has been seconded by Commissioner Davidson. So we're going to move into discussion, debate, and questions. Does anyone like to start? Yes, Commissioner Knoll.
I have a question when you refer to the mix-up at the start of the meeting, how this resolution would have remediated that.
This particular measure would not have remediated it. However, we have prescribed procedures that are already codified in our rules and our bylaws for how any measure is brought before this body. Again, a lot of what you submitted was substantive amendments. I understand that the secretary may have missed that item, but the manner of how those things are introduced are already codified. That was not formally circulated in any way that I believe the secretary or the chair would have noticed that it was being introduced. So this is just, again, an example of where I'm saying, rightly or wrongly, maybe we're not all doing things in the same way. And again, I totally believe what happened at the outset of the meeting was an honest mistake. My reaction to it was that a lot of hard work goes into bringing measures before this body. And for something to be taken off of the agenda or not considered because of a, rule that was not followed by someone else, that's unfair to me, because then I can't represent the interest of my constituents. So that's where I'm saying that I think what happened earlier could have been avoided had a formal, circulation of the amendment happened.
Okay, we're going to continue. Yes, would you like to be added to the speakers list?
Yes, please.
Okay, Commissioner Miller.
No, I want to respond. I just want to start by saying that I really appreciate the work that you had put into that resolution. I also understand the challenge of institutionalizing systems, structure, procedure, and I think especially in bodies like this, where we do have significant turnover. I do want to stress that every single person on this commission is qualified to be here. And I think as we navigate the rules and the procedures, as we're learning, as we're all trying to normalize and institutionalize that, I think we should show some grace. And I also just want to say, for the reason for that last resolution, while I really appreciate standardized rules, while I really appreciate the consistency that they provide, I think for the purpose of the work that we do, there's a overly rigid requirements do risk limiting how we can have the ability to address the needs of our constituents. We are not council. We have to serve communities that do not always come to us from the same place that the rules and procedures are meant to address, if that makes sense. And I think overly prescribing the way that we engage as commissioners or as committee chairs really risks eliminating the nuance and our ability to be flexible in how we serve those needs. So while I really appreciated that, and I did mention this in our committee of the whole, I do think this is a great starting point to put together for guidelines. I completely agree with you. Having some structure that we can reference, codifying it, takes it to a level that I do believe eliminates some of the discretion that we as commissioners will be able to have in engaging in our work. So I just want to say that I would love to see that as a guideline. As we sort of go through it, if there are things that we feel we need to codify, I think that's something worth revisiting.
Are there other commissioners that would like to speak on this?
Mr. Chairman, I just reserve the right to close debate.
Well, I think Commissioner Bhatia wanted to speak, and I was going to put myself on the speakers list too. Go ahead.
I actually have a question for you, Commissioner Miller. Are you referring to guidelines from this current resolution we're talking about, or the previous one?
The previous one.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought
I wanted to add myself to the speakers list here.
Mr. Sherman,
Oh, you were going to go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then just to confirm, for this current resolution, everything in here is stuff that we've already discussed. It's just bringing everything we've already been doing in line with technical guidelines. Is that correct?
Yeah, the basic substance of it is everything that is supposed to match what is in the ANC Act that is supposed to be in our bylaws. And then there are just general, again, guidelines that we've always followed that, again, just puts them all in one place.
Okay, thank you.
I really quickly wanted to speak on this. I support this resolution. I know that OANC took a look at our bylaws. I know we've had lots of changes to our bylaws. This probably does not make them perfect. There are probably some things in here that I disagree with that kind of like overly codify things, but I generally agree with some of the technical changes that OANC suggested to us to make. I thank Commissioner Thomas Davis for adding in here the part about taking out the requirement for our meeting being on the second Wednesday, given that we are have changed that and are being flexible on it. My only question is to clarify in section 6, the commission sitting at the committee of the whole shall meet at least 1 week prior to the regular meeting of the commission. That just means that it has to happen. There has to be a week between the two at least, correct? I'm just clarifying the language.
Yeah, I mean, I kept that as is because it still allows us the flexibility to meet on the second Wednesday of the month if we decide we need to shift. So,
Or third, but it's at least a week between the two. Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's all. Are there any other discussion, questions, debate from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other,
Motion to call the question.
Okay, we are moving to a vote on resolution concerning amendments of the bylaws of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A as put forward by Commissioner Thomas Davis. All in favor of this resolution, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. All abstentions. All right, this motion does pass. Thank you. We're moving on in our agenda. There was Commissioner Thomas Davis did rescind the resolution concerning strategic parking enforcement and transportation improvements. So we are skipping that. And we're moving forward with R250012, a resolution concerning accelerating small business success and revitalizing the local economic development landscape in Columbia Heights. Commissioner Thomas Davis, you have 5 minutes to speak on this. Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start by saying the obvious here. It is essential to acknowledge that small business plays an incredibly vital role in shaping our entire neighborhood's economic health, its unique character, and the potential as a destination neighborhood, not unlike downtown DC or the Wharf. We have something to offer, just like many other prominent areas of the district. Columbia Heights boasts a rich history and a distinct identity to which our local and small businesses significantly contribute. However, the current economic realities necessitate proactive and concerted efforts to ensure the continued prosperity of these businesses and our neighborhood. Over the past 5 years and more acutely over the last 10 years, Columbia Heights has witnessed a concerning trend of small business closures. These closures extend beyond mere economic stats. They represent a tangible loss of jobs, a weakening of the fabric that connects our neighborhood, and a decline in the overall vitality of defining features and characteristics of Columbia Heights. Examining specific instances of these closures provide a clearer understanding of the challenges faced. Meridian Pint, a restaurant and bar that served the neighborhood for 9 years, closed its doors in its Columbia Heights location on 11th Street in April 2019. The owner cited many evolving needs as reasons for relocating to Arlington, Virginia. This closure was considered a significant loss for the 11th Street corridor at that time, suggesting the departure of a well-established community anchor. Flash forward to 2005, Macon and Thirsty Crow, which operated in that same space on which opened in that same space on March 8th, 2020, closed earlier this year on February 9th. Most recently, in February 2004, the CVS location at 14th and Irving Street ceased operations. This closure raised considerable concerns, particularly among our seniors who relied on the pharmacy. These are all symptoms of local market dynamics, population shifts, and a number of other factors. But largely, this pattern suggests a need to understand the specific elements that really differentiate successful business from those that have long struggled here within the Columbia Heights context. We have had abrupt closures of the Wawa in June of 2020. We've also had big name stores closed like Five and Below, DSW, Petco, and Pizza, and so many others. I could go on and on. Even with the current Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant Main Street program, a perceived need exists for more effective, targeted small business support and commercial area development. Main Street programs exist to offer various forms of technical, assistance such as grants, consultations, trainings, and workshops for the business community. However, the neighborhood is left divided on the issue of our continued vibrancy because of the loss of businesses and the fact that many others will not come in their place. Some residents have moved, as many has done in my district on Kenyon Street as well as Irving Street, believing Columbia Heights has lost its charm and that many other areas are the more up and coming hotspots. That said, the main street, our main street, 14th Street, what it faces, the challenges it faces, really suggest that the current reach or effectiveness of the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant Main Street program in its current form is not working. It has limitations and it merits reexamination. So this measure before us does several things. It calls for an update or planning review of the Central 14th Street Northwest Retail Action Strategy.
30 seconds.
And the Central 14th Vision Plan and Revitalization Strategy. Mr. Chairman, I asked for 30 seconds. I need to just get through what I have.
We allocate 5 minutes to speak. I'm just giving an update on time. So please continue. You have 30 seconds.
Emphasizing to the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development about Great Streets grant funding. Revision of the Main Street boundaries to establish separate designations for Columbia Heights and Mount Pleasant, allowing for a more tailored economic development strategy for both neighborhoods. And finally, it suggests comprehensive changes to the sidewalk vending and civil enforcement framework to allow us to get to a place where our entire commercial corridors, 14th Street and 11th Street, can thrive. Mr. Chairman, I urge colleagues to ask questions about this measure because I think we have an opportunity to send a very clear, really unambiguous message that we care about the future of this neighborhood and we believe that our commercial corridors are vital enough that we need action now. We can't wait for legislation. We can't wait for anyone else. We have to solve this problem. So with that, I move the measure for consideration.
Thank you. All right, there is a motion on the floor to adopt the resolution from Commissioner Thomas Davis concerning accelerating small business success and revitalizing local economic development landscape in Columbia Heights. Is there a second of this motion?
Second.
All right, second by Commissioner Knoll. We'll now move into discussion and debate and questions. I see Commissioner Easley's hand first. Go right ahead.
Commissioner Thomas Davis, I've read this. I think you make a good case for it. Did this go through the Small Business and Economic Development Committee?
No, it did not. And again, per our rules, this is what we also have to understand. I have an obligation to represent my constituents. I have heard from them. They have urged concerted action. If we are, again, prescribing some new rule on the fly, that every particular measure that comes before this body that happens to in some way be germane to the work of a committee, then that needs to be a rule that is brought before the body, deliberated and voted on. But again,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to be very clear here. I'm not trying to make a rule here. I just wanted to ask. I don't think every single resolution has to go through the committee of jurisdictions. You are absolutely right. In your discretion as a commissioner, you can bring it up before the full commission. I just wanted to know if you had. Well, let me ask you this. If bear with me, I apologize. Has any other commissioner worked on this, or was this just in your personal capacity that you worked on this resolution?
Well, Commissioner Easley, the measure was introduced well before. First, I circulated a notice of intent to introduce the measure. 1. 2, the measure was introduced and discussed at the committee of the whole meeting. And 3, in the intervening period between our CAL meeting and now, no other commissioner reached out. And again, that should not preclude action by this body. We have a professional courtesy to all of our colleagues to examine the measures that are before the body. I welcomed and invited comment, feedback. Again, Commissioner Knoll reached out about a different measure. So to answer your question, that's my long way of saying no one else reached out, but I assume that everyone, again, understood the context that was being, put forward in this measure and was in some way in agreement with it.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to get some insight into it. Thank you, and thank you for working on this measure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Easley. I see Commissioner Morales and then Commissioner Knoll.
I'll defer to Commissioner Cole first.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Thomas Davis. I think needing to refer everything to committee is not necessarily the best course of action. This body needs to work quickly and effectively and deliver on real change for our constituents. And on reading this resolution, I certainly agree with Commissioner Thomas Davis that this is a very important issue for our community. It's something that needs to be addressed. This seems to be a good way of doing that. My question would be, would the Small Business and Economic Development Committee even have substantial changes to this resolution if it were to go before them? Like, would that even be a good use of their time? Would it just change this legislation in any meaningful way, or this resolution, excuse me, in any meaningful way, or would it be more of a procedural step if it were to happen?
I can add myself to the speaker's list after Commissioner Morales. Go ahead.
I will defer to you, Commissioner Sherman. Full disclosure, I'm going to move to refer this to the Small Business and Economic Development Committee for further discussion and deliberation, but I'll let Commissioner Sherman go first.
Yeah, I'll speak on this. I'll just respond to Commissioner Knoll's comment. So I chair the Small Business and Economic Development Committee. Commissioner Bhatia is vice chair of the committee. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think this is has a lot of important things that call out that I know I've discussed many of these things with Commissioner Thomas Davis before, and that I'm happy that we can put forward a resolution to call out some of this stuff. I think given how important this is, it merits more time. I did read it. I had a lot of comments, but we have a committee that has been established for more than 2 years with committee members who are really passionate about small business and economic development. I would love to put this in front of them and see what changes they have. I don't know what changes will happen. There might be many changes that are recommended. There might be very few. There might be, hey, we think these parts are good and we should keep it in and we should take these parts out. I don't know, but I think this type of thing merits more community engagement. And we heard from the council member tonight about the Neighborhood Management Authority. And I think coupling the understanding of that legislation with what's in here is also very important. So I personally would like the committee to have more time with this resolution before it comes forward. That's just my response. Commissioner Davidson.
Again, thank you, Commissioner Thomas Davis, for bringing this to the table. I'm in complete agreement that the issues that underscore this are in need of addressing. And I'm glad you brought attention to them. And I think also the matter of not everything needing to go to commission is important to call out. I think there are matters that need to be addressed timely, and for those reasons, don't need to be brought to committee. The nature of what it's addressing to me being something bigger and not addressing something specific that feels specifically timely, it's something that I feel speaks to the nature of what I love about the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, and that it is reflective of the neighborhood. And I feel our committees are special for that reason, and that it has the opportunity to be run by, our neighbors and, small businesses. And I would really love them to get a look at what you put together, and I would love their input. That feels important to me. Commissioner Sherman mentioned this as well, but I'm personally also just really interested to hear how this would interact with the Neighborhood Management Authority. And they seem to be, kind of addressing similar things. And so we just want to make sure that we're devoting our resources and attention to this issue in the best way, and not, maybe dividing things or doing anything like that if they both happen to be addressing the same thing. So I am glad you brought this forward, and I would support putting it to committee.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond before Commissioner Morales makes his motion. So I'm gonna try to unpack what everybody said. One, I'm gonna follow on what Commissioner Davidson as well as you said. The Neighborhood Management Authority is a bill before the Council of the District of Columbia. Nothing in this measure is connected or tied to that. We have long-standing economic concerns and issues that are independent of a bill that is still not moved through the legislative process. So to tie something as central as the future of our local economy to a piece of legislation is respectfully foolish in my opinion, because we need to act. I respect what my colleagues have said, but I am not marrying this to what is moving there, because that is a separate bill that is addressing separate issues. Yes, there are going to be some similarities in what the long-term outcomes are, but we need to start this conversation now. To the point about referring this to committee, I've had the pleasure of being a longtime attendee of the meetings of the Committee on Small Business and Economic Development. And I respect the hard work and opinions that come out of that committee. But respectfully, with everything that has happened over the last 3 years that I have been actively working alongside that committee, no policy conversations have actually happened or emerged around these issues. So we can refer this to a committee who had the opportunity to actually bring this forward for several years and did not. So I want us to be incredibly mindful of, if this was a priority for a committee, it would have been brought forward. I have listened in those committee meetings, and much of what is discussed is captured here. So I want us to be, again, mindful of us just creating these rules on the fly that then says an introduced measure, which has already been before the committee of the whole, had weeks of discussion time, now is going to go back to a committee with God knows what time will, what will come of that, what changes, whatever the case may be. I don't want the spirit of this measure to be diluted by anything else, because it is largely focused on how do we spur the conversations that are going to move our neighborhood forward. Our small businesses are hemorrhaging. They are suffering. Our Main Street, they do what they can, but our businesses are crying out for some other help. And sending this to a committee is not going to solve that. I respect all my colleagues' opinions. I appreciate all of your feedback, but I implore you to not set this precedent, because if this is referred to committee, I will make sure that every measure that comes before this body is sent to a committee before we vote on it.
I see a hand from Commissioner Easley. Go right ahead. Well, actually, Commissioner Easley, before you go, Commissioner Morales, you haven't spoken yet. Did you want to say anything? I don't think you'd already spoken on this. I'm just go. Okay, Commissioner Easley, we'll go to Commissioner Miller first, and she hasn't spoken, and come back to you.
Yeah, first of all, Commissioner Thomas Davis, I don't think there's anything foolish about referencing legislation that, one, has been a long time coming. It has been very thoughtfully put together and has a tremendous amount of a look back on the history of our neighborhood and our community. No, please don't interrupt me. I see you.
I didn't say the legislation was foolish.
No, you.
I want to clarify my
sir,
remarks. I didn't say the legislation was foolish.
Hold on.
Me.
I just don't want my words taken out of context. Please do not do that.
I'm saying calling a commissioner foolish for referencing a piece of legislation that is very relevant to the work that we're doing now is out of line. Sir,
That's not what I said, but please.
You know
Okay,
what?
Commissioner Thomas Davis, Commissioner Miller has the floor. We're going to add you back to respond afterwards. Commissioner Miller, please finish your remarks.
What I'm saying is, I think there's a lot in here. It's very dense. I agree, we don't have to refer everything to the committees, and you're welcome to do that from here on out. But I do think that there's a lot of history missing from this conversation. I think there's some complexity that I would, to be quite frank, this is why we have committees to do the deep dive, so that we as commissioners do not have to individually, every single time we have these very dense resolutions, go through them individually. We have committees to do that legwork. Now, whether or not you agree with it, that's fine. I respect your opinion, but please respect ours. And when we vote on it, please respect that.
All right, Commissioner Easley, go ahead.
Okay, 2 points here. First of all, I think it's unfortunate that the temperature is pretty high on a matter that I think we all agree with. Economic revitalization in our community is really important. Let's just remember that, like, I think we all agree with that base point. Second of all, I'm going to support Commissioner Thomas Davis's resolution as is. I think he makes a good point. He did bring this matter up in a timely fashion. He told us about it at Cal. I believe I received this resolution in a timely order from him when it was submitted. I have reviewed the resolution before. I don't think it directly conflicts in any clear way with what the council is proposing. So speaking purely from me, I disagree with some of the other commissioners, and that's fine. We have respectful disagreement. I am willing to move forward and support this as is. And that's how I'm leaning.
Thanks, Commissioner Easley. Are there other commissioners that would like to speak on this? Commissioner Morales.
I would like the motion to refer this to the Small Business and Economic Development Committee for further discussion and deliberation.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor from Commissioner Morales to refer this resolution to the Committee on Small Business and Economic Development that requires a second. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Bhatia seconds the motion. Okay, we are now moving into a discussion on this motion, which is to move it to a committee. Is there any discussion, debate on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to keep my comments brief, if I may.
Sure.
One, I want to just quickly respond to Commissioner Miller. First of all, again, I respect the opinions of all of you. You all know I go out of my way to solicit feedback and respect the contributions of everyone here. So I have the utmost regard for our commissioner from District 8. So I'm not in any way trying to say that what she was saying was foolish. I said to tie it to a measure that we know is not actively moving in the time frame we need. I mean, this conversation needs to happen yesterday. And I think all of us want to be a part of that conversation. We want to all sit down at the table and figure out what is going wrong, what is happening, what more can we be doing? The point I made earlier about, herding cats, that has to be our job. We have a ward council member for a reason, yes, but we need to be the ones on the ground talking to our businesses, understanding what those challenges are. That said, again, this measure going to committee will largely not change the substantive language. I am cognizant of the history, Commissioner Miller. I understand there are complexities to everything about our great, our great neighborhood. There's always a story, but that story can happen as we begin conversations. This is about asking the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development to come be for us and talk about what are they seeing? What is their assessment of what is happening here in Columbia Heights? Because quite frankly, I don't think anyone is paying the adequate level of attention to this neighborhood that they should. And that goes for everybody at every level of government. So we need to affirmatively say this needs to happen. So again, I urge my colleagues to not send this to committee. I am more than happy to accept an amendment that allows the committee to be a part of conversations to come. I know that that will be the case no matter what, but I think that this needs to go forward so that we, again, don't keep sitting on our hands.
All right, we're still in discussion and debate on this. Commissioner Bhatia, go ahead, and I want to also add myself.
I just want to add some context for the reason I seconded the motion to move it to committee is for all the reasons that you're stating, that I think this is a good measure and it can be strengthened, have more buy-in if we give more time for other people to engage with the conversation, members of the public, members that are not here or have not part of the drafting process. It is because of all the things you've said that I think it merits going to committee to get even more buy-in and more thoughts and more ideas before you move it, since it is so important. So I don't see this as a way to kill it or stop it or sit on our hands. It's more to open it up, make it better, and then move it in, 1 month.
Thank you. I quickly want to make a comment. I know the previous resolution regarding strategic parking enforcement and transportation was not brought before this body tonight, but the Committee on Transportation did have the chance to look at that one. They marked it up, they had discussion, they had things they liked and they didn't like. That should be the same for this because this is such a big deal and so important that I think it merits that. The second thing I'll say is that many times commissioners on this body start writing a resolution or a letter and they send it to somebody else and they say, hey, I'm thinking about writing this thing. Here's a draft. We don't just introduce it as is and start from there many times. And that's fine. That is legally acceptable. But it was, I was never approached about it. I know Commissioner Bhatia was never approached about it. It just was introduced flat out. And so I want to collaborate on this. I want to take a deeper look at it. I know neighbors want to do the same. And that's why I do feel that we can do that by going to committee. And again, I'll underscore what Commissioner Bhatia said, like, there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's very important. Let's get it right. So I'll stop there. Any other comments? Commissioner Davidson.
I just want to quickly speak to the comment made earlier about the connection that I made between the legislation and this resolution. Thank you, Christine, for the words that you said. You had brought up, Commissioner Thomas Davis, I think a really important point at the COW, that it's important for us as commissioners to ask questions and to have this discussion in front of our constituents so that they understand our thought process behind that. As such, I asked a question. I understand if maybe it didn't make sense to you, but I think it's important that we set an example for our residents and our neighbors that questions are welcome and that it's okay to be figuring out this process together. I personally did not think it was a foolish question. You're entitled to feeling that way, but I think we need to create a space and be thinking actively about the space we are creating, that our residents and our constituents feel comfortable asking those questions and coming into the space, not knowing the answers and seeing us as resources to welcome them into the space, not knowing, and taking them in and walking them through, how we understand things. So I just want you to think about that. And how it was by your advice and what you said that prompted me to ask that kind of question. And because I was looking forward to hearing your answer, because it was something I didn't know the answer to. I'm still learning, I'm still new here. And so I just wanted to remind you of that.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to,
Very quickly, if we don't have any other speakers, if we're on second round very quickly, I want to say.
yes, we're still in discussion about the motion to move this to committee, refer this to committee. Yes.
Motion to call the question.
Okay, there's been a motion to.
Chairman, I was trying to speak and so.
I know, but now we have someone who's called.
But that's not how that works.
Okay, we're going to let Commissioner Thomas Davis speak and then I'm going to proceed with the call to question request. Go ahead.
I want to stay on the record that what I said was that I did not say the question was foolish. I said to tie it to a piece of legislation that is going to move on a different parallel and maybe passed at a different date, or the committee has a different view on that piece of legislation, to tie it to that, in my opinion, would be foolish. What you asked was very appropriate and I appreciate the question. I just want to say that on the record.
Thank you. All right, there's been someone has called the question. We are going to, and I don't think there's any more debate or discussion left anyways. So we are going to move forward with a vote. We're voting on a motion to refer this resolution, accelerating small business success and revitalizing local economic development landscape in Columbia Heights, to our Small Business and Economic Development Committee. All in favor of referring it to committee, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
No.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Commissioner Easley, did we record your vote?
I apologize. It's a nay.
Okay, Commissioner Bhatia, does the motion pass? I believe that. I'm going to call for a roll call vote just to make sure we have accurate numbers. Commissioner Bhatia, can you call out commissioners?
Yes, thank you.
Mr.
Can we proceed with the roll call vote? Please.
Well, my point of information is, what is the quorum requirement? We are missing a commissioner and we have a seat that is technically vacant. So
Yeah, we have eight commissioners here. So approval would be 50 plus 1.
We have 9.
No, Carla's not here.
No, sorry, 8. Yes, you're right. All right. I recognize myself first. I vote yay. Commissioner Lehman Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Terry is absent. Commissioner Sherman.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas Davis.
no.
Commissioner Davidson.
Aye.
Commissioner Knoll.
Nay.
Commissioner Easley.
Nay.
That's 1, 2. So yeah, 4 yeses and 3 nos. Nope.
No,
1, 2, 3, 5. Thank you.
Yes, the motion passes. This will be referred to the Committee on Small Business and Economic Development. That has passed and we are moving on. That brings us to our final resolution of the evening. It is Resolution 25-0013, a resolution to declare the sense of the Commission concerning Columbia Heights neighborhood investment and revitalization, as sponsored by Commissioner Thomas Davis. Once again, you'll have 5 minutes, including making the motion, and we'll proceed. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to withdraw this measure. I think the commission has made clear that what is before us is not a priority. So I will withdraw this measure, and I think it's painfully clear to our residents that these issues are going to be kicked to another day. And so, there's no point in moving this if we're not moving the other measures. So I will withdraw this measure.
Okay, as the sponsor of this measure, it has been removed from the agenda and rescinded. That does bring us to the end of our new business and the end of our meeting.
Nope.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. My apologies. We do have one more item here, in other business that was amended at the beginning of the meeting. This is the P-Keep letter sponsored by Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Miller, you have 5 minutes to speak about this and then make the motion. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to try to keep this quick. I did actually send this out to those commissioners who have preschools that would be affected under the pre-K enhancement and expansion program. Just a quick background. We all know it's going to be a tight budget season. One of the things that is up for discussion, there has been no confirmation as to whether or not it will be cut, are these funds for this pre-K enhancement and expansion program. What this does is it provides community-based organizations funding for seats for early childcare. One of the things that I really want to highlight is that this particular program currently only serves 30% low-income students. One of the things that I've asked for in this particular resolution is that as we move forward with the funding on that we prioritize our economically disadvantaged students, I did want to highlight again for our public, and I think to Commissioner Davidson's point, it's important to recognize that in our commission area that we have childhood poverty rates, or we have childhood poverty at almost 70% in some of our pockets. And so while I realize that a lot of conceptions of Ward 1 is that we are gentrifying or that we are doing well, we do in our commission area have high poverty rates. So really making sure that this program prioritizes the economically disadvantaged and really making sure that we can maintain this funding in those daycare centers or in those early childcare centers that are currently receiving. I'll also just flag for our community's reference, these childcare centers are not only providing childcare for young children, they are also touch points for families and parents. They provide services, they provide meal programs. So they do a lot of heavy lifting in our community. And so making sure that we can preserve funding, especially in those types of demographics, I think will be really important moving forward. I think the cuts that we're looking at in the future are going to hit our vulnerable communities. And so whatever we can do to sort of make sure that we're lifting those priorities, I think will be a benefit.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Is there a motion you have?
I move to vote on it.
To approve
I
the
move
letter?
this for consideration. Sorry,
Okay.
it's been a long night.
Great,
folks.
we're almost there.
It's been a long
Just
night.
need an official motion. Okay, is there a second on this
Second.
letter? Hearing multiple seconds. I heard Commissioner Bhatia first. We're moving into discussion, debate, and questions. Are there any comments or questions for Commissioner Miller? Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner, Chairman. I think this is a great measure as an educator myself, not in pre-K, but an educator nonetheless. I think this is very important. And I think we should be doing as much as we can to support these schools and these communities who are being impacted by these budget cuts and other shortfalls that will be coming down the pipe, federally otherwise. And with that, I move to call the question.
Okay, respectfully, Commissioner Morales, just want to make sure there's no other people that want to comment on this. Questions? Okay, we'll move into a vote. All in favor of approving the resolution concerning ensuring equitable funding for the pre-K enhancement and expansion program, PKEEP. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? All right, seeing none, this motion does pass and we've adopted the resolution on pre-K enhancement and expansion. Okay, that does bring us, I believe, to the end of our measures and for the evening. Our next meeting of the commission is Wednesday, April 16th. That's, Commissioner Knoll's birthday. The third Wednesday of the month, right back here at Latin American Youth Center. Please, we encourage you to join us in person. We enjoy it. We encourage you to join us online. And also listed are a bunch of upcoming committee meetings. Our Committee on Public Safety, Education, Youth, and Family, Special Committee on Public Life and Neighborhood Planning, Small Business and Economic Development, Housing and Zoning, and Committee on Transportation. We encourage you to get involved. So with that, is there, unless there's any dissent, this meeting is officially adjourned.